Society. My name is Nicholas, and welcome. Yeah, thanks for joining us so early today. And we've got a very exciting, hopefully educational program this morning for you. It's 9:30 to 12:30. So again, we thank you for spending that 3 hours with us. For those of you, just so that you know, there will be a bio break somewhere in between. So if you really need to go, we will have a break at some point. Again, Family Enrichment Society, the mission is to build loving, lasting families. And the way we do it is via programs that help educate, build awareness for families, right? And this being one of them. Some of you would have attended last season's Dads Matter talk, where we had Mike Hall come in and talk about how to raise kids, particularly from a perspective of a dad. If you wanted to see some of those videos, actually they are online, and you can access them, and quite insightful, right? Because most of us don't really think that much about what's the dad's role in a family, right? And so today's talk, just to let you know, so you would have, those of you who have attended before, you know that we sometimes make the recordings available. This talk, unfortunately, we will not be doing that. The speakers here are actually professional speakers, so this is their livelihood, and they have kindly and generously agreed to do this talk with us for free. They've just volunteered to actually provide this content to all of you, so as you know, as such, we will not be recording the talk and making it available, right? Because again, this is something they do as part of their work.
Why?
Yeah.
Got bubbles.
After 999.
Can. As long as
Sorry, can I
alkaline blue
request
color.
that you all mute
Can.
yourselves?
Can.
Yeah. And so without as you know, again, those of you who have attended, FES is run by volunteers, and we do require donations to run these programs. So it would be very helpful if you're able to actually help us by donating. It doesn't have to be, we're not looking for huge sums of money, right? Even $10, $15 is we'll be more than grateful for your support, right? And there is a donation slide that Adrian is pulling up here. Yeah, we will flash this later on as well. But if you can take a photo of it, use the QR code to make a donation. Again, $10, $15 is more than enough. If you can spare more, of course, we'll be very grateful, but we are not expecting that. Lastly, just before I hand off, I want to introduce you to Olivia. Olivia is not a stranger. You've seen her at one of the earlier sessions. So Olivia is assistant editor at Straits Times, and we are really grateful for, again, her time. She's volunteered to come here to moderate the session. She will introduce you to what this talk is about and the speakers that we have lined up. So over to you, Olivia.
Thank you very much, Nick Lee. So there'll be two Nicholases coming up that you'll be familiar with throughout this session. A very good morning to everyone. Once again, thank you very much for joining us very early on this Saturday morning. I'm Olivia Quay, and on behalf of the Family Enrichment Society, another warm welcome to you to our Ask Our Families series. If you attended our previous session last month, you'll be familiar with one of today's speakers, psychologist Nicholas Gabriel Lim. In that session, he advised how parents can help their kids deal with mental stress. And today we'll address the increasingly concerning issue, I'd say, of gaming and social media addiction. You'll also be hearing from two other speakers. First, Ruth Lim, one of the many hats that Ruth wears is as an eSports coach. So she knows all about game design, and she'll share more on that and even help us understand the benefits of gaming, believe it or not. Our second speaker is Yong, who's also very much in the gaming world. He's an associate psychologist with game dependency program Comeback. And Yong will be talking about the different personality types among the gaming community. And Nicholas will be back at the end to round up everything, including, of course, the main topic, game dependency and addiction, as well as how to help our kids develop healthy gaming habits, and even more so for those who are already struggling with their screen time. Well, these speakers, 3 speakers across a 3-hour session, it's going to be long, but informative, useful, more importantly. As and when, you can, of course, send in your questions, because that's the whole purpose of this series, for you guys to ask all these experts your burning questions. You can send them in via the Zoom chat function, and we'll get them answered throughout the entire session. Have your cup of coffee next to you, as I have. Remember again to mute your audio, just in case, because we want to absorb everything that our speakers have to say. Buckle in, and of course, let's kick things off first with Ruth. Over to you.
Thanks, Olivia. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Can everyone see? Can? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to start the sharing, but I thought, thank you so much, Olivia, for introducing us. So maybe some of you might be wondering, there's 2 logos at my back. There's Comeback and there's Susus. So I thought I'd just do a very, very short introduction to where we are from. So I'm from Susus. We are a youth social enterprise, and currently we are building a positive and healthy gaming community. So we actually organize community competitions for gamers to bond and compete. And also for schools, we conduct game addiction talks to bring more awareness to game addiction and share how we can take control over games. So we also conduct workshops for students to learn social and emotional learning through video games. So yes, like Olivia has shared, that there's a lot of benefits to games. And also for Yong, if you saw him as one of the co-hosts, he's the associate psychologist for Comeback, and Comeback is actually our game dependency intervention arm, where we work with gamers with deeper issues such as excessive gaming addiction. So sometimes we actually work a one-to-one consultation as well as group therapy. So I thought I'd just clear all the quick admin stuff. Like, for example, if you really want to contact us, if you can't stay at the end to get our contact, here's our website at www.sus.com, www.comebackworld.world, and our parents group as well is called Parents SUS. So you can drop us an email at hi@comeback.world. And of course, if you have any questions during the sharing, feel free to type inside the chat function, and we'll either address it during or after my session. So okay. So now I have introduced to you my where I'm from, and of course Olivia did a good job introduce ourselves, but I think I'll just share with you the gaming side of me. So I'm of course Ruth, but I'm known as Potato Fluff to gamers. That's my in-game name. So I'm super passionate about gaming, to the point that as long as it involves games, I'm up for it. So I actually did a diploma in game development. I conducted Dota 2 workshops at the eSports Academy, as well as coached and managed Dota 2 and FIFA Online 3 teams that represented Singapore. So at the top left-hand corner, you can see that there's a FIFA Online 3 team that I managed in 2016, who won third globally in the EA Champions Cup. We managed to get a take-home 60,000 USD. So the Dota 2 team that I coached represented Singapore in the Asia Pacific Predator League 2018. So before achieving all these, right, I have a confession to make. I was actually addicted to games. So playing games, right, really made me feel alive and actually numb my feelings, but temporarily. So I played through 200 game titles, and most of it by the time I was 17. So I was, in studies-wise, actually I was consistently doing well until my O-levels, which I did way below expectations. So what happened was, during my O-levels period, I couldn't stop playing games, and I suffered the consequences. I actually lost focus during my exam, which caused me to blank out and even miss 28 marks worth of questions. So during my binge playing, I faced a serious issue. It was that I played so many games, right, that both old and new games were no longer attracting me. So what am I going to do? So at that time, I was thinking of developing a game that could satisfy myself. And that was why I actually joined the game development course. So studying in a game development course, right, was really an eye-opening experience, because being in an environment of games with most people who played games, like they actually played way more than me. So I assumed that my binge playing would go crazy, like I'll just go non-stop, right? But I realized that surprisingly, the more I understood games, the less I played. That was because I was actually getting better at breaking down the game to identify which part of the game could potentially get me hooked, and even having the decision to do or avoid it. So, I'm going to go through the animation right now. Let me just reshare the slide. Okay, hold on. So I'll actually be going through the basic of game design through an animation. So don't worry, you'll not be actually I will not be talking through it. You can actually enjoy a short animation. So let me just quickly share the slide. All right. So I thought it would be a bit more fun for us to actually realize how not just about how game design can have us hooked onto the game, but also have understanding flow on how it keeps us motivated in the game. So during the video, there are actually 4 components to take note of about the game structure. So please take note. And as well, if you have any questions, you can feel free to type in the chat. So let's begin the video.
Ever wondered what makes games so enjoyable? What is the secret behind these games that keeps us craving for more? The answer is in the game's design, where fun is made in games. Let's dive deeper, starting with knowing what makes up a game. A game has 4 basic components. The first basic component of a game is goals. Goals are task-oriented. All the players in the game work towards these common goals, and players are rewarded for accomplishing these goals. For example, in a zombie game, the goal is to escape to a safe house to hide from the horde of zombies. The second component of a game is side quests. Side quests are optional mini-challenges purposefully placed in games. They are not critical for achieving the goals of the game. This means that a player can ignore the side quests and still complete the game. Side quests offer small rewards for their completion, yet they can be completely unrelated to the game, like a card game in an RPG game. For example, in farming games, the side quest could be to befriend the villagers to gain food. The third component is resources. Resources are tools that the game provides to help players achieve the goals. For example, the resources in a zombie game are flamethrowers and health packs. The fourth component is rules. Don't we all hate rules? But in games, the rules are the law of the game world. Just like in our world, we have a proper law and order. They determine what gamers can or cannot do in the game. For example, in a MOBA game, while escaping from enemies, a player can walk anywhere on the map except through trees and objects. Both rules and resources are very important in a game because they control the level of difficulty and the fun of a game. When a game has less resources, it becomes more difficult. When rules are more relaxed, the game is too easy. Now you can see how games can be fun through these 4 components. Flow. The highest level of fun is when players are in the zone. Being in the zone is also known as being in the flow. Being in the flow means that a person is so focused in an activity that they are unaware of the surroundings. How does flow happen in a game? Have you ever felt bored while playing a game? This is because your skill level is higher than the difficulty level of the game. In other words, the game is too easy for you. If you feel stress while playing a game, it is because your skill level is lower than the difficulty level of the game. In other words, the game is too difficult for you. Flow happens in a game when your skill level and the difficulty level of the game are matched. This is an optimal engagement when you feel that you are up for the challenge. Now it begs the question, how do games get you into the flow? Games are generally designed to start easy. This means that rules are more relaxed and more resources are provided. The difficulty level increases as you progress in the game. It is essential for you to improve your skill level in order to survive. Let's take the example of Tetris, a game that I'm sure most of us have played. It starts very slow, but gets faster progressively. But if the difficulty level stays the same for too long, you will find it boring. To make it continuously fun, the game needs to up its challenges or difficulty. To keep up with the game, you need greater focus and skills. The game is constantly challenging you to keep your interest. This is why gamers can't stop playing. So now we know why we can never get enough of this fun, because games are designed to satisfy our need for accomplishments and affirmations. It is important to realize that this satisfaction is temporary and not real. It provides a good short-term entertainment and relaxation, which is great, especially during quality time with family or friends or when we are stressed. Games should not consume our lives. Break the flow when we need to. So let's have some good fun playing games.
All right. I hope you guys enjoyed the animation. So as mentioned in the animation video earlier, these are the four key components of a game structure, which is a goal, side quests, rules, and resources. So in each game, there's actually unique game structure in that sense to make it more interesting and of course more fun. But other than the game structure, right? And of course, they mentioned flow. Games actually have their own reward system to motivate players. So these are the common reward types in games to motivate players to play the game constantly. All right. So in order to get the in-game rewards, players would have to do a series of actions. So that's the fixed number of actions. So they are designed this way so that the players would value the rewards they receive from their hard work. This is also known as grinding or farming. So there's also a second reward system that is where element of luck is involved. So for example, there's a chance for a rare in-game reward to be dropped, right? So obviously the more you play, the higher the chances of getting it. So last but not least is a time factor. This is the easiest way for a player to get rewards because all they need to do is to log in and claim the reward every hour or so. So this conditions the players to open the game more often and increases the chance of them actually playing the game. All right. And there are actually moments where in-game events happen and they usually provide limited edition rewards. So this actually motivates the players to get into the game wherever it comes to mind with the hope of getting rewards. Yeah. So, okay, so I saw a question. Thanks, you for answering. So if you actually enjoyed the videos during our sharing, right, you can find it on our Facebook page on Comeback at Comeback on Facebook. Yeah. So don't worry if you missed it, you can always watch it again. So next, I'll actually want to share as well, now that we know about the game design, about the reward system, about flow. Of course, this is the key thing that we want to look at, which is the trending game genres. So just to take note, I'll be introducing all these 5 genres that's very popular with the youth right now. But I'm not going to drown you with information. This is just really to understand what the game is about just a bit, but actually more of how do you actually help to manage your children's gaming time based on the game genres as well. So I know a lot of parents will be thinking games are all the same, right? Just think about it as sports. It can be under the same sports category, but each sport is different. For example, badminton or soccer is 2 different sports, or even swimming, right? All right. So the 5 genres that we're going to go through are the Battle Royale, first-person shooter, also known as FPS, a multiplayer online battle arena called MOBA, fighting games, as well as the sandbox games. Yes, thank you, Andrew, for your question about multiplayer games. Actually, multiplayer is not a genre itself, meaning that it is a feature in any game genre. So it can be like any of the game, it can either be a single player or the multiplayer game. So first, I'll actually want to go through the Battle Royale. It's one of the latest game genres available. All right. And the goal of the game is to be the only survivor, the last man standing. So if any of you watch Hunger Games, yes, it's similar to that. And to identify the game, there are 3 main components. So first is usually the map with a colored circle. All right. Just to explain what the circle does is that it indicates where the safe place for the players to be. If they're outside the circle, they're actually their health will start depleting. So next is the compass at the top to help the players navigate where they are. And last but not least, you can see the characters. But as we are speaking about the genre, usually nowadays game developers will try to change things. So it might look a bit different, but these are usually the core of what a Battle Royale game looks like. So there are usually 100 players in each round, lasting about 30 minutes. So if your kids aren't that good in the game, it will be less than that, okay? So the moment they lose by getting killed, they can actually start the next round without waiting for the current round to end. So let's say in 30 minutes, if you keep dying, you might actually play more than 10 rounds. But if you actually last very long, you only maybe play 1 or 2 rounds. So skills required to play Battle Royale will actually include patience, good reaction time, and split decision making. So for example, they have to run away and try to play safe, or they actually can try killing the opponent, all right, without getting spotted. So you'll notice that a gamer playing Battle Royale genre games will usually have the game volume very, very high, or they'll be using their earpiece or headset. So that's mostly because they're trying to locate the other players by hearing where the gunshots are from, okay? So some of the popular games from the Battle Royale genre will include PUBG and Fortnite. So next, we'll go through the first-person shooter, right? So or FPS in short. So the reason why it's called first-person shooter is because it's from the first person's perspective. You can only see the hands on the screen as shown in the image. So depending on the mode played, first-person shooter games usually has the capture the flag goal to actually obtain something before the enemy does. One common feature is just like they'll like to, for those who are familiar with Counter-Strike actually, it's usually the plant the bomb or you defuse the bomb team. So they're playing opposite each other. So the player also wins, right? If other than the goal to capture the flag, the others is to actually if they manage to gun down all the enemy players. So the biggest difference between the first-person shooter and battle royals, right? If you compare, they're both shooting games. They're also about fighting, shooting. Is that for first-person shooter games, they are usually two teams only. So either 5 or 6 players per team, and the player can only leave after a game is completed, as compared to battle royale, you can leave the moment you are dead. So each game round would actually last about 15 to 20 minutes. But in the popular CSGO, the Counter-Strike game, it can actually go up to 1 hour, where both teams are playing neck to neck, okay? And these games actually require fast reaction time and accuracy. And of course, a lot of teamwork. So the third, so in this genre, it will include the games here, CSGO, as I keep mentioning over and over again, Overwatch, and Valorant. Valorant is actually one of the newer game titles, which was released actually last year only. So next, yes, Lilian was asking what's the genre of Mobile Legends. It is this genre mobile. So multiplayer online battle arena, all right? So it is actually a strategic team-based game. Then the goal of the game is to take down the opponent's main structure. So how do you tell whether it's a mobile game or not? You can actually tell when there's usually a clock in the middle, and it actually shows the team score, and there's a map. Sometimes it's on the bottom left, top left-hand corner. It's usually at the corners of the screen, and as well as there's character information to show you what's going on, the player what's going on. So usually there's 2 teams of 5 competing against each other, altogether 10 players per game. And for mobile phone, right, like Mobile Legends and even the newest Pokemon Unite, it's actually between 15 to 20 minutes per game. And for game titles like Dota 2, computer game titles like Dota 2 and League of Legends, it takes easily 30 to 45 minutes. And actually, to be honest, Dota 2 actually might drag to an hour or more. So for the mobile genre, it actually requires a lot of strategic thinking, as they are required to plan their next move while controlling their characters simultaneously. So some of the popular genres would include, of course, the 3 titles here, which is the Dota 2 and League of Legends. And actually, I wanted to share about Pokemon Unite as well, because about Pokemon Unite as well, because it's released only this year. So it's actually the Pokemon version of the mobile genre. And also for League of Legends, the popularity may actually be increasing because they just recently released an animated series on Netflix called Arcane. So you might actually see some kids picking it up. Yeah. So let me just go through skip some slides. All right. So here is the fighting game genre. All right. It's actually more popular with the PC and computer and console gamers because it's readily available there. All right. Yes. Thanks. Street Fighter. Yes, this is Street Fighter too. So the goal of the game is to actually deplete the enemy's health bar through fighting. All right. So it's easily identified by the characters moving side to side. You can see their side profile. And of course, the health bar, which indicates the player's life, and a timer in the middle. Okay. So the key features of the fighting game is that each round usually lasts less than 2 minutes. But I know a lot of parents will be thinking, wow, okay, then I just get all my kids to play fighting games since it's only 2 minutes. But no, because usually a gamer would play multiple rounds, and depending on the game mode, the duration may vary. So the most popular mode to play is actually called the ranked game, where the first player to win 2 out of 3 rounds wins the match. Okay, so each round is limited to 90 seconds, and a winner is determined no matter what. So if the player wins, they'll be matched against other similarly ranked players, and the cycle keeps repeating until the player loses. So although the game time seems very short at 2 minutes, each game might take up to 10 minutes because you need to consider matching that opponent, connecting, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's why we put an estimate of 1 hour, which includes the waiting time. And of course, we also consider one more fact, that most players usually win up to 5 opponents consecutively. All right. So fighting games is actually a very high skill game. Contrary to a lot of beliefs of fighting games being only about button mashing, it actually requires the player to identify opportunities quickly while performing a series of moves perfectly. Yeah, and some of the popular titles, as mentioned earlier, are Street Fighter, Tekken, but I think the more family-friendly ones would be Brawlhalla, as well as Super Smash Bros. On the Nintendo consoles. Last but not least, the sandbox games. Yes, I think there was a question about what's Roblox, which genre, so on and so forth. So this is the genre. So in this game, the players are allowed to freely create, modify, or destroy their environment, actually with no given objectives. So just imagine the sandbox in physical playgrounds. Kids play with the sand for fun, right? So because the rules are defined by the players, there's actually no key characteristic to pick out from the game. So for example, the goal, depending on the mode of the room, they could be actually completing an obstacle course. Or in another mode called bed wars, the players are required to defend their beds from the other opponents. Okay. So actually some of these rooms, these game modes might actually even act like a lounge for players to hang around and chat with each other. That means they don't even play anything. You just sit there, chat with each other. So as there's no fixed game mode in sandbox games, the duration of each game depends on the game mode the player chooses. And also, because there are so many game modes, players tend to serve and load different game modes before actually committing to a game. Thus, each game would take approximately 45 minutes. So some of the skills, of course, might be developed is like their creativity in maybe building, for example, like your Lego blocks in the mode, planning, as well as curiosity. Okay. So some of the titles will include Minecraft, Roblox, and Growtopia. And if you notice, the graphics are usually not realistic, as which this will actually allow the player to be more creative with their approach. So here is the summary table for all the games. Feel free to take a photo. And we would like to recommend for parents to actually use the number of games instead of a definite amount of time, for example, 1 hour, to set playtime limits. Because having to stop midway in the game is very frustrating to a gamer and to the other gamers who's playing the same game. So just put, for example, imagine playing a soccer game and having your goalkeeper leaving the game halfway. So this way, you can actually set suitable play limits based on the duration of each game. You can then set the number of games based on the estimated time your child has for gaming. So do take note that as gamers, it is very unsatisfying to play only one game because we usually use the first game as the warm-up round. So for parents who want to actually know more and even find the table, right, we actually have a blog post to actually share more about game time limit and boundaries. You can actually access it through the QR code or through this link, okay? So there are actually, now we are talking about popular game genres. I also like to highlight some games that we should avoid having our children exposed to. So these games on these slides are actually rated NC16 or M18, okay? So despite this, children might actually get access to them through illegal downloads or even stating their fake age through the online shops. So first we have Grand Theft Auto, top right hand corner. So in this game, you're actually playing as a criminal and having objectives like stealing cars, robbing shops, and even sleeping around. So next we have Outlast, bottom left hand corner. So in this image, in this game, in this game, it's actually a survival horror theme. So it can contain disturbing content and a jump scare. And usually for survival horror game genres, it contains gore. Yes, so very explicit. So last but not least is Mortal Kombat. It is from the fighting genre, but this time with a lot of blood and a lot of gore. Usually for the other fighting games, they're usually more tame with regards to violence and blood and gore. So whenever a player is defeated in Mortal Kombat, it will actually show the animation of the defeated player being decapitated. So there are actually many more games available in the market that have such content. So it's advisable to look out on what are the game titles that should be avoided. So actually IMDA actually has, I can send the link later send the link later on how do you actually find the game titles and to check what's the rating of the game. So you can have more awareness of whether you should actually allow your kids to play that game or not, all right? So of course, when we talk about getting players' attention, motivating them to play, there's also another side of things, which is game developers actually use applied psychology in games. So applied psychology is really about trying to make you do a type of action through understanding your mind, all right? So to find out what players are like, their own motivations, we actually look at our 4 gamer player types, which Xing will be sharing more about. So for now, I actually am done with my sharing and actually pass the time to Olivia to facilitate the Q&A for this session.
Thanks so much, Ruth. That was very informative, very insightful. And thank you for answering a lot of the questions that have been submitted via the chat function. Thank you so much to our audience, to our participants for sending them in. I just want to cover, before we move on to Xing Yong, I just want to cover maybe a couple more questions. First of all, Gregory Teo via the chat function has asked, what are RTS? What is the RTS genre?
All right, so I love all these questions, means that you're a gamer. So it's actually a real-time strategy game where, okay, I'm not so sure how many of you are from that generation where instead of controlling one character, you actually have to build a whole army of your own army. So for example, you have to build your structures, you have to actually manage your own army to defeat the opponents. So that was actually very complicated and actually requires a lot of strategic thinking. So what happened to the game? Yes, like Civilization, a Red Alert, Warcraft, I can hear all the gamers ringing. So yes, StarCraft is a very popular game. So what happened was they actually modified the game, because not everybody can have that micromanaging skill, right? And so they created mods and it slowly became the mobile genre where you actually, instead of controlling the whole army, they control only one character. And it started picking popularity, and thus we call it like the RTS genre is more for the gurus or for those hardcore players. And now mobile becomes more for the casual or even the more competitive side of things, yes. So that's RTS.
I see. Well, Ruth, another question is, I guess, something on a more personal note, because, you know, one of the concerns that parents have, besides, of course, their kids spending too much time on the games, is the element of violence that some of these games have. And so the examples that, you know, it's all about fighting, shooting, and all of that, right? And then you specifically pointed out 3 games that should be avoided. So I guess, where do you stand on, you know, like those extreme examples of the 3 games that should be avoided versus, games that are, I guess, more allowable, even though they contain violent elements like shooting and everything.
All right. So I think before we even talk about video games, right, let me just put it to perspective for parents who are concerned about a lot of shooting and fighting is that actually even when there's no such media outlets, boys are actually playing quite violent. Like, for example, they'll pretend to shoot each other. They like the theme of war. They like to take their sticks and hit each other. So boys are actually very exposed, especially like children actually are very exposed to the idea of defeating each other and winning. So I think also we actually had a blog post on violent games and aggression that actually video games does not make a does not make a player actually more violent after playing. Yes, so there's no violent tendency. So I think maybe Xing can help to share the link to the blog post to have more information about that. But also when I was highlighting the games, right, I have a confession to make is that when I was playing games, because my older siblings were actually playing the NC16 M18 games, right, I had a lot of access to it before I was actually legal to play it. So actually I realized that as there's some truth to the ratings in sense that in the amount of gore and when I meant gore, it's not just about visually you see red color blood, but you can actually see body parts and inside of it, so on and so forth, which can be very disturbing. So even when I was growing up and playing certain games like this, I realized that, it's actually quite disturbing and I wish I didn't see it. You know what I mean? Like I had the chance to not see it at all. So that's why I'm actually very, very particular when it comes to games like this to actually highlight and say, like, let's say fighting games, if you are actually playing a slightly more violent one, why is it M18 versus NC16, so on and so forth. So it's good to actually check it out and why is the ratings as such. Yes. Hope I answered the question.
Right. On a related note, why do you think games most of them, I would say, have violent content? Is it tied to what you mentioned earlier about, kids having this tendency to defeat each other and everything?
Yes, I think so. Also, there's actually, we call it the consequence in the game. So for example, right, if let's say you should see the title, you win, it doesn't bring the kick out of you as a gamer. So, but if you see like a player defeated, wow, you feel that sense of satisfaction, like you have defeated him. It's not just a logo, it's not just points, but you actually see that you have triumphed over the other player. So this is actually one of the some of the very intricate game designs that actually make you feel that you are very powerful. I think the key idea of playing games is escapism, as well as the sensing of achievement. So usually game designers will design all these little things to make you feel that, yes, it's worth your time. Yes, you have the kick out of actually playing games.
I see. Okay, so we have a lot of questions addressing addiction. How do I get my child to, play less game or spend less time on the games and everything? And actually, great questions, but we want to save them for later, which I believe will be more relevant for Nicholas's topic later on. So hang in there, don't worry, we'll get them answered to our participants. But I guess while I have you on, Ruth, since I want to ask a more technical question that was submitted by Andrew, what are your thoughts on games that require gamers to buy credits?
All right. Okay. So this is actually what I've been sharing with a lot of the students, not just with parents. I'll actually also answer some of the questions like Genshin Impact. I think there was a question about the genre and all that. Yes. So nowadays, parents, I know that sometimes as Singaporeans, right, we like to get free things. So free to play games are in the rage right now. All your mobile phone games, you have access to them. But take note, right, that usually in a lot of free to play games, they have things like microtransaction. They'll say like every time before you download a game, they say may contain in-game purchase. So what happens is there's things like something called cosmetics in the game. We call it skins, like to beautify yourself. Or in Singlish term, we call it zheng. You want to look good, you want to express yourself. So what happens is they'll actually ask you to buy using a certain currency. And this currency actually, you only can use real cash to buy. And that's when you see kids trying to spend, trying to differentiate themselves from other people, or even to make themselves feel stronger with a different set of clothes. So I know that there's a lot of kids who actually, because of this, they actually start being very attracted to it. Like they just want to buy everything. And sometimes they lose their self-control. But I think to really put in perspective is this: I am actually quite against spending in games, because I feel that a game should not be putting stress on yourself. You should always remember why you are actually playing the game. Is it because if I don't buy the skins, if I don't spend, would the game be any less fun? If it's less fun, then I shouldn't be playing it, because it requires so much. I'm trying to de-stress, and now I'm stressed over spending. So the advice I always give the students is to remember why you're playing. Is it because of the spending, or is it because of the fun? Do you actually need this in order to have fun or not? And even if they want to spend, to also spend within their budget, and most importantly, to actually ask their parents on, especially when they are making such decisions, and to respect the parents whether they are allowed to spend or not. And on the topic of that, so that's why games are becoming smarter. Like I was saying earlier, where you spend on cosmetics, where there's little to no impact to gameplay. Games like Gacha, so Genshin is an example I want to share. They call it, so whatever the strong resources such as weapons and your characters are only unlockable through loot boxes. So what are loot boxes is that when mystery boxes, right? You spend a certain amount, you got a small percentage of getting a very rare item inside or character, but you cannot buy it directly. Like for example, I want to buy Apple, I cannot buy Apple. I need to hit buying the box and have a chance to do so. So this is what we call the gacha genre, and it's not, sorry, the gacha games, it's not a genre itself, meaning that every genre can have a gacha element of how they get a resource. So it's actually important, not just for parents, but also children in that sense, to know which games they're playing. Does it have that gacha element? And our advice is that if there's no self-control, to actually just avoid the genre altogether, avoid the gacha games altogether, because a lot of players actually end up spending thousands of dollars so that they can actually have that whole collection, or like to have that stronger characters. Yes. So even for myself, as I mentioned earlier, that it's so I'm against spending. I actually end up spending a bit in the game. So I think for parents who might not be familiar with what's the experience like, spending money, how come so fun? I actually documented, or rather blogged my experience on how is it like to play actually Genshin, a gacha game, and how it actually makes me feel, and what are the odds of actually getting the strong characters. So I'll just leave the link in the chat so that you can actually, the parents can actually read about it.
Right. Well, thanks so much, Ruth. Okay, we still have a few more minutes to answer some questions related to game design. And one of the other, your other subtopics was about, the benefits of gaming, which you addressed when you listed out the categories of games, because there's skills required to do well, right? Like patience, strategic thinking, teamwork, and all of that. So are there games that are better than others? Like, some people in the chat have asked, is Roblox a good game? Is Minecraft considered an educational game, and all that? So what is most suitable for, certain age groups, or like when it comes to development, I guess?
All right. So I think just to clarify that actually any game can be educational. I mean, sounds weird, right? But games are really a tool, all right? But like money. So for example, when you give a kid money, you won't know, the kid doesn't know how to use, and that's why it becomes negative. They start to anyhow spend, so on and so forth. Similar to games, if you don't teach the kids about games and awareness of what's the danger, so on and so forth, they'll just misuse it. But if you actually able to share with them why they're playing the game, how they actually play the game, they actually can harness the benefits of games. But I also know that some parents will be, of course, they want to steer their kids towards more, beneficial game for them. I think some of the, like Roblox, actually, if you just research a bit more, there's actually something called scripting in the game involved. Like they're supposed to create their own world. They even create their own game modes and design small designs of game design for them to actually get other players to try out their own game. So I would actually advise that instead of like maybe just playing, to encourage their children to actually start creating as well. And they can actually learn coding, learn scripting. There are a lot of games out there which I think a lot of parents feedback to me. They're saying like, hey, my kids were playing this coding game. Is it good for them? I say, why not? You're learning programming, like go ahead and do that. And I think also like maybe even games like League of Legends, Dora, they're asking, hey, is this suitable for my children? I saw some of the questions. Say, instead of thinking, is the whole game suitable or not, have a conversation with your child. What do you learn from the game? Like if you're teaching mommy and daddy, what is the thing that you find the game very useful about? So as you speak, you realize what the kids are thinking, and just having conversation and say, so actually, how do you increase? Can you actually get more money? Like for example, in the game, can you actually buy your items faster? So they're, oh, okay, they start thinking, they start strategizing. And I think just little things like this, they actually, we call it game-based learning. So it's just taking a game and learning. So there's also very interesting games. I think I share, there's even some games where you're supposed to solve a crime just by listening to the clues. So it actually improves listening comprehension in that sense. So there's really tons of games out there, and of course, to harness the benefits of it. That being said, of course, please refer to the game guides on what is suitable for your child in terms of the, like I mentioned earlier, the violence, gore, even drugs references. So I thought there's two websites. I'll just share the link to a MDA one that I mentioned earlier. But the second one is also the Common Sense Media. It actually reviews the games, whether it's suitable for your children, whether it's advisable or even recommended for your children or not. And actually that is rated by both parents and children. So yeah, you can have more information about that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ruth. Again, the questions are coming in hard and fast, and most of them are related to addiction and how to cut down the kids' time on the game. We will answer all of that later on. In the meantime, though, keep them coming. If there's anything else left for Ruth, we will also answer them later on in the session. But right now, we want to hand things over to Xing Yong. But first, before we do that, we'd like to seek your support in helping the running of the Family Enrichment Society with a generous donation. I hope you can see the slide very soon. Here we go. Open your banking app. The instructions are really simple, right? Open your banking app, select the scan and pay option, scan the QR code and make your donation. We appreciate it. Thank you so much. The instructions are there, but if you're still a little bit unsure about how to make this donation, you can of course just drop us a message in the chat and we'll help you out there as well. So we'll just give you some time to sort through that, and then we can move right along to Xing Yong. Okay, so Xing Yong, you will be covering the different personality types, right? When it comes to people in the gaming community. So
Yes.
I'll just let you take it away. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Olivia, and thank you so much to Ruth for the very insightful sharing. So just very quickly, I'll share my slides. All of you can see this, right? Okay, great. Yeah, so thanks so much. So Ruth touched a lot about the games. Just now, when she was going through the questions, I just had some pointers in mind. That, you know, when we talk about the games, the benefit of games, it's also not just about the cognitive, you know, the skills that can be developed, but for a lot of the kids right now, games become their virtual playground, right? Last time we had the physical playground. Right now, the gaming world has become their virtual playground. And for them, right, it's not just about the cognitive benefits, but it's also about the relationships that they can develop among their friends, right? As a way that they can learn communication. So something that is very interesting is that in games also, soft skills like being able to communicate, being able to have teamwork, you know, have good communication with one another. These are things that the kids can learn as well. And I think that for Susus, one of the things that Ruth and her team, she goes into schools and she uses games to teach, you know, some team-based games, you know, like can be cooking game, can be the games like Brawl Stars, right? And they use these games, right, to really leverage on these games to teach the kids how to communicate with each other better, right? And through that, they can really learn all these soft skills that is very invaluable to their life lessons. So that's something to consider, right? I think, I'm not sure, Ruth, later you might want to share more about the tele trip. Another thing is that, to the point of violence, I think that's something that I did write an article upon. Is violence, you know, is violence the cause for aggression? Or is violence making the kids more violent, right? That's something that I wrote in a blog post. And basically I just combed through some of the research that is available. And yes, there is a small correlation, a very, very, very small correlation as to when the kids, you know, they engage in violent games, you know, there might be some correlation there. But the thing to take note is that it happens for a very, very small subset of people with very specific personality types. I think next slide he'll go through that a little part, but you also consider, but there's also another factor to consider, which is the children's, the gamers' family environment, right? If they are one in a very hostile environment, the likelihood just shoots up so much higher, right? So there are other factors to consider. And I also recently just come through another research that basically states, that basically kind of explores, right? Is it violence or is it the frustration that they feel, right? So they found that it's not so much of the violent content, right? But the kids that they experience some form of frustration in competitive games, right? When they lose the games, right? When they feel maybe they feel very lousy after losing a game. That is the key indicator to why aggression occurs afterwards. So that's something to really think about, right? Is it the violence or is it something else that's in play? Okay, so just very quickly now, I put that aside. If you want to read more, you can just read the blog post, right? If not, then I can perhaps answer some of the questions later on, right? So starting the sharing proper, right? I'm here to share with you the other piece of the puzzle, which is the gamers themselves, right? So we'll share about the games. Here is the gamers part, right? So this is an introduction about myself, not as extensive as Ruth, so bear with me. But for myself, I'm the associate psychologist in Comeback. I'm the one that is working a lot with the gamers, on the ground, right? Trying to help them to overcome their game dependency. And it helps that I was a gamer myself. So you see over on the left, right? That's Ruth and me, right? We have been friends for a very long time already. That was back then, I managed to win a Dota 2 competition. Didn't win the 60K that Ruth's team won, but $200 was still quite something. Yeah, so I've been gaming since I was very young. Back then, when you remember the computers were bulky, square shaped, and then you had to use dial-up internet. So that was the period where I was gaming, and I'm very heartened to see a lot of gamers in the chat knowing what is RTS. That's something that we grew up with. So glad to see you guys there. For myself, I struggled a lot with excessive gaming as well. I won't jump straight into that, but that will be something I'll delve into at a later part. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the 4 gamer player types. So what are they? What is that exactly, right? So that is basically personality types, right? Except in the gaming context. Parents, you think through the times when you were younger, right? You had all these different games. You didn't have video games, right? But all these different games that you had to usually play with your friends, right? You notice when you play together with them, right? They're all the very different personalities, right? People play very differently. Some of them, they play to win, right? They're very gung-ho. Whatever it takes, they will win. They'll try to win, right? Some of them, maybe they care more about the strategy, trying to develop, trying to analyze and come up with different tactics. Some of them, maybe they just play because they want to be with their friends. Some in the current term would be like FOMO, right? Wanting to be together with them. So you notice that people play games very differently and people seek very, very different things in the games. Right? So it informs us a lot on their motivation and their behavior. So one single game, right, you can have really the multiple different types of people playing the game in a very different way. So the player types we'll be sharing is based on the current research right now on gamers, right? And basically there's the 4 types that come out. So I'm not going to bore you too much with a lot of my sharing, but just to let you guys have have the video, right, to kind of explain through very quickly the 4 different types. When you watch the video, right, parents, I just want to encourage you, think back to your child, right? I know to many of us, it's a gamer, right? How much different can gamers be? But think back to the specific, traits that they may display. Does your child fit into any of the different profiles that is described, right? So just have a look. Yeah, let me reshare. I think I didn't share the sound. Okay. Sorry, Okay, Ken, thank you for your patience.
Understanding gamers. Do you know that gamers are divided into 4 different player types? Today, we will present to you the 4 player types that gamers can be broadly categorized. So let's begin with the first player type, the achievers. Achievers are gamers who are competitive and love rewards. They love treasure hunt. The more challenging the goal, the more satisfaction they feel. Their main goals in-game are gathering points and leveling up. Thus, they are motivated by the accumulation of tokens or rewards in completing the challenges in the games. Achievers hate losing. They love to be the first, be it getting a rare item, completing the game, or in ranking. Difficult games are fun for achievers. This gives them bragging rights for their achievements. Due to achievers' competitiveness, they can be aggressive. They might display intense emotions of anger, frustration, and boredom during games. So, it is not uncommon for achievers to curse and hate a game while playing, but later declare it as a great game. Achievers will likely stop playing a game after they beat the game when the challenge wears off. Trolls, hackers, cheaters, and attention farmers most probably are achievers. Do note that not all achievers are trolls, hackers, cheaters, and attention farmers. The second player type is the gurus. Gurus can be described by two words, mastery and systems, revolving around strategic or tactical play. Acquiring skills is their main goal. They want to master all the techniques in the game. For gurus, winning is only meaningful if they have earned it through mastery of the game. They will continue playing the game even when the game is mastered. They enjoy the experience of being the master of the game. Gurus typically enjoy open games, which are games with no specific endpoint, especially strategy, construction, and management games. They are good at multitasking, for example, building an army out of diverse unit types. Thus, they like games that allow them to experiment with as many combinations as possible to achieve their goals. Next, we have the explorers. Explorers value enjoyment and experience in a game. They are always on a lookout for unique and interesting experiences. They take pleasure in an engaging story and an intricately designed game world. Explorers like to survey the game's map. They enjoy seeking out information. They will look out for obscure actions in tuckaway spots, interesting features, and exposing the game's internal setup. They are the players who know the shortcuts, tricks, and glitches in their never-ending hunt to discover more. Wonder, awe, and mystery are important to explorers. They decide whether they like a game or not within minutes of playing or even by observation. Explorers will not play a game they do not enjoy and will stop playing the moment it ceases to be fun. They might get the help from achiever or guru players when they meet challenges in the game. Lastly, we have the socializers. Socializers are more interested in other players than the game itself. That's why they talk more than they play. They also enjoy role-playing in games. Socializers like to be involved in the community aspects of the game, like managing communities or role-playing that builds relationships through storytelling. Socializers love to play with others. They are less likely to play solo games. Even observing other players can be interesting. Socializers generally do not like direct competition. So, after explaining the 4 player types, we hope you understand gamers a little better. If you are a gamer and would like to find out what player type you are, go to come.
Okay, yep. So this last part is basically talking about the player types test that we have. It's a free online resource that is made available for everyone on our website. So, you can feel free to, check out the link over there. The QR code is on the bottom right. But basically, it's something that I guess a lot of the gamers, myself, Ruth included, all the younger gamers are very interested in, basically know what type of players they are. Okay. So I hope that video basically gave you like a rough idea of what are the different types, right? If you feel that it's too fast or there's a lot to absorb, don't worry. I'll be going through each of them, right? And hopefully help you tease out the differences as well. Okay. So for achievers, right, these are the very competitive reward seekers, right? They are the ones that seek a lot of achievement, right? That hence their name achievers, and they enjoy the competition, right? Being the best, right? Pitting themselves against the other players. So that's what drives the achievers a lot, right? So the name of the game for them is being able to have that outcome that they desire, which is the achievements and being the best, right? So for one of the particular traits of achievers, right, is they tend to be very prone to anger and frustration, right? Because of their competitiveness, right? constantly pit themselves against the other players. If they don't get the result that they want, very much more prone to than other player types are, they tend to get very angry and very frustrated, right? These are the players that are also very willing to grind, right? So many of you, I believe many of you who are not gamers are very unfamiliar with this word. What is grinding, right? Grinding is essentially, being able to devote, a certain amount of time and effort to engage in a particular task that can be repetitive, right? With the interest of, trying to be better or trying to accumulate a high score, right? So parents, you think about basketball players, for example, right? We don't use video games, right? We use basketball players. How does a person, get better at shooting? For them, it's going through the same motion of shooting and shooting over and over again, right? It's the same repetitive motion so that they basically internalize, right? It becomes very intuitive for them. So in a way, that's considered grinding, right? Because some other types of basketballers to them may be like, oh, I'm doing the same thing over and over again. That's so boring, right? That maybe not be interesting or engaging. But for the achiever types, right, for the goal of being better at the games or the basketball, they are willing to devote the time and effort into improving their gameplay through that grinding effort, right? So that's essentially grinding, and these are the player types that are the most willing to devote the time and effort into it. And then next we have the gurus, right? So gurus, first thing that they mentioned just now is mastery. They want to master. So at this point, right, we had a lot of questions from others, right, that basically ask, Xing Yong, isn't achievers, trying to master as well, right? They want to get very high achievements, they want to score very, very good points, and good rankings. Isn't that mastery? The answer would be not really, right? So the argument, in here, right, mastery is being able to understand, being able to really master the techniques and the skills involved, right? So basically, achievements is not mastery, right? So for example, if you have a child, right, maybe the child scores very high marks in his or her math exam, right? You just use math for example. Does that mean that the child has mastered the exam paper, right? The answer may be not necessarily, right? Because just because it's scoring high marks doesn't mean that the child may have fully understood the questions, right? For myself, when I was still a student, the way I studied was I just try to memorize. Right? I don't really need to try and understand, right? I just memorize, regurgitate during the examination, and then done. I may not understand the questions, but for me, through that, I'm able to achieve that high results, right? But that may not be mastery, right? So for gurus, right, it's very important that they understand, right? They break down the systems in the game, right? And they always ask a lot of the why questions, why, right? Because they want to really understand so that they can create the most optimal strategy. And they like the games, right, that allow them to have a lot of diverse, different ways that they can win, right? Just one way it may not be very satisfying to them, right? So just now we talked a lot about RTS games, right? There are different strategies that they can play in each of the different games that they can come up with, right? So those are the types of games that the gurus really enjoy. So the main difference between guru and achievers, right? You can think one of the main difference is achievers care a lot about the outcome. The process is a means to achieve the outcome, right? The outcome being that they do very well. For gurus, they care a lot about the process, even to the point that sometimes they may lose games, right? But for them, even if they lose the games, but in the process, they learn something that they can refine their strategy further, that is a win. That is a win to a guru, right? So they are very strategic and very logical gurus, right? They tend to ask a lot of why questions. They are able to break down things step by step, right? Even behavior-wise, right? Sometimes when we talk to some very hardcore gurus, right, the way that they are very straight to the point and very direct. Why, right? Can you tell me why this happens? I want to understand why this happens, things like that. Right. So that's the way that they communicate. And a lot of times they are willing to experiment with the different pieces as well. So if they are given that freedom, they will basically play around in the game, right, to try and break it. Next is the explorers. This is right up Ruth's alley because she's an explorer, right? So one of the main drives for explorers, right, is through the exploring, they are able to achieve that sense of wonder, like, wow, the games, what else can the game offer me, what else can I discover about the games, right? So it's a lot of novelty, They like to seek the new things in the games, right? So these are the players, right? You let them in the gaming world like Genshin, right? So some of you know Genshin. It's a very big, very vast gaming world, right? And you let a player like Ruth, right, who's an explorer, just go wild, right? They will explore every nook and cranny for you, right? So very key difference with guru and explorer, right? Both like to study the game, right? Gurus want to go deep. They want to go into the process and they really want to understand and break down. They go very, very deep into it. Explorers like to touch and go. They are internally what we call them, right, is the capo player type. The busybody, they love to see and touch everything. So as a result, they are very discovery oriented and they know a lot about games. Trust me, you talk to Ruth, right? She's a walking encyclopedia. I'm not joking, right? And these are the player types, right? That they may even be interested in things that are not relevant to the game objective. So one little anecdote was that when we were playing this shooter game called Left 4 Dead, right? It's a shooting game, survivor shooting against zombies. So all of us were very fixated on trying to kill the zombies and reach to the next stage. Then she came out with one very random question, which was, after they survive, right, what happens to the survivors? So it's like, to us, it's like, why do we need to know? It's not relevant to the gameplay. But for her, these are the things that really interest her. This is the game to her, right? All these little things, they make up the game entirely. So that's the explorer. Last but not least, socializers. So the name suggests these are the social people, right? What they're looking for is that sense of belonging, that community kampong spirit, that when they play the games, right, they feel like they are part of their friends, saving the world together, right? It may not even be just the games. I'm sure some of you parents, right, have heard about this thing called streaming, right? Where the players just watch other people play games, right? So it can be a bit puzzling. Why not play the games itself? But for them, right, when they watch the other players play, right, they are able to engage with the players. So it's the relationships. They are able to engage with the chat, right? Where there are so many, like 1,000 other people watching and they are able to engage. Why, do you see what he did or not? That's the social part, right? If you still don't understand what streaming is, right? Just imagine, right? Me, instead of I'm talking now, right? I'm playing a game, right? And you're all commenting on the chat, what did he say? What did he do? Things like that. So social, it's all about relationships. So they love to interact with the other players. And when you talk to them, right, they are very knowledgeable about what's going on in the community, right? They can tell you, who are the up and coming streamers. They can tell you, my friends, who are my friends and what do we do? What do they like to do? Right? They can even tell you about gossips like, oh, this streamer, do you know he or she likes this particular person? They are very in the know. Okay, so that's a socializer. So then some parents will be asking me, no, you tell me all this for what? Aren't they all just gamers, right? They play the games differently, so what? They're just gamers. While it's true that all of them at the end of the day, they play games, right? They may play the same games. But the thing that motivates them is very, very different, as you notice, right? Some play to win, some play for friends, some play for, mastery, some play to really just have that sense of immersion, right? For us, right, when we look at the player types, right, what we are really looking at, right, is what are the needs that they are trying to fulfill in the games, right? For an achiever, right, why are they trying so hard to achieve? Why are they trying so hard to be the best, right? What are they looking for? They're looking for the affirmation, the recognition that, look, I'm good, right? Look at me, this is my achievements, I'm good. For socializers, why? They're friends, right? They are looking for that relationship, right? All the different player types, they're looking for very, very different things, right? Mastery, being able to have that novelty, something new. But when the gamer is playing excessively to the point where it's disrupting their life and they are very unhappy about it, right? But they still play. Why? Right? A lot of times is why. And when we look at all these players who are really at the deeper end, right? The ones that are really very much affected, right? And playing excessively. Why is that? Why are they playing, right? A lot of times, right, when we really dive deep, with our clients and everything, you notice that, for example, the socializers, perhaps, somewhere along the line, they got bullied in school, right? They are unable to meet those social relationships in school, and hence the games become the gaming world becomes a platform for them to achieve those needs, right? For achievers, right, perhaps they are not receiving the recognition, right? Perhaps they feel very lousy about in reality, right? That's why they're diving so headstrong into it, right? So you have all these different needs that they're looking at, and knowing their player types, right, really helps you to start thinking, what is it that they are looking for? Rather than the games being fun by itself, because all the games will tell you, I play game because it's fun. But what does fun mean to them? Fun means very different things, right? So having that conversation with them. All theory, right? Let me just relate a story about myself, okay? Myself as an achiever, I had a kind of a rough start when I was growing up, right? My parents, they love me. I love my family a lot, I can tell you that. But growing up, I guess I didn't really have that family connection that I really wanted. Why, right? Because my father earlier on, right, because of financial issues, he had to move overseas to work. He had to go overseas to work for a very long time, right? That left my mom basically to juggle her own work and to take care of both me and my older brother, right? I didn't have much supervision, right? I didn't have much time with them growing up, right? So another thing that they didn't know until very late, right? Because we didn't have that connection, right? Was that I was actually bullied in school, right? School time in primary 5 was very, very rough for me. I was a bit more, quieter, right? I wasn't so outspoken. I didn't get along very well with the classmates. And unfortunately, three of them, decided it was a fun thing to make my life a living hell, right? They would basically come to my desk, they would push me around, right? One point, they will basically pick on me to the point where I remember there was one part, they will find me in their classroom, and back then I brought the umbrella. I told my mom, I was scared it's raining, but I brought the umbrella basically as a self-defense, and it was a fight, me against them, right? It was that kind of situation. I was all alone, right? I didn't want to tell my family because I felt that at a certain point of time, it was my fault. I didn't want to tell my teacher because I wasn't the best student back then already. I was skipping school, right? I was finding school, very difficult, very painful to go, right? So I felt that it was my fault and I had no one to turn to. That's where games, right, really came in and in a way saved my life back then. Saved my life, right? Because back then I had nobody. But in the games, right, I was somebody, right? When I played the games, right, I was very competitive. I really wanted to be the best among my peers. I really wanted to achieve the very high ranks. And even to the point where the games, right, started becoming a chore to me, right? Because parents, when you think about sports, right, how do the athletes become better, right? They constantly train and they train and they train. For me, right, when I play the games, right, sometimes, right, I can spend hours, right, just in the training room, right, doing the same thing over and over again, right, so that I can improve myself. That's what I did, and I achieved very high ranks. So I felt like I was very powerful in the gaming world. Wow, people recognized me and people respected me, right? I was somebody where in reality, I was nobody. I don't want to turn to. And I also had friends then, right, online that I could talk to, right, that I could have that sense of belonging. So it was a very nice space for me to be in back then. Basically, my results completely flunked lah. Needless to say, right? I was skipping school, right? My studies, I was barely passing, right? When I started to game excessively, I completely flunked my PSLE, right? To the point where I went to a secondary school, a neighborhood secondary school that was, I think, back then the ranking was the top 10 on the bottom. I'm not joking. It was really one of the top 10 schools on the bottom, right? And I was in the normal academic stream. I don't see anything wrong with it because I was there, but it's more of based on my parents' expectations. They expected more from me. And that's where the disappointment came, right? So it was rock bottom and I felt like, school was pointless already. I had nothing here. It was a pain for me, right? In secondary school, I wasn't bullied. I wasn't really bullied, but, it just wasn't a good place for me, right? So I remembered when I was in Sec 3, right? There was a turning point for me. And that was where, so I forgot to mention, but all my subjects were flunking except for one, English. I had a certain foundation in English because my parents were English speaking and they always read storybooks to me when I was young, right? So my foundation of English was somewhat there and I managed to scrape through. But one thing I really enjoy, right, is writing compositions. I love it when they give me the essay questions, describe a certain scenario, then you write a 300-page essay or whatever, right? I love writing stories and I wrote and I put in a lot of effort in that, right? For me, right, there was one day where my English teacher decided to read out my composition. She decided to read it not to shame me, but she genuinely thought that it was a nice, it was a good writing, right? And she read it out. And I remember that day so clearly because like it was just a proud moment for me. And all my classmates were there like, wow, Xing Yong, this guy, he can write so well, it was just a very proud moment. And for my teacher back then, it was something that she did regularly. So maybe in her perspective, it was a small thing. But for me, it meant the world to me, right? It was the first time that, I received recognition for something other than my games. It was the first time that I believed that my studies was possible, that I could actually achieve something, right? And so it really started a domino effect. From English, from the composition, I really felt like, I wanted to do well in English, right? Just English, right? And I started to put in effort in my SAQ, besides just my composition, and my teacher was helping me through, and I did quite well, right? I got the first in my class. And then I decided, hey, you know what? If I can do it for English, maybe I can do it for humanities as well, because history, social studies, it's kind of like a language subject. So I thought, why not, right? And I really went all out, on my own will, right? I took the initiative. I was like, I'm going to at least try, to do well, and then I got first in it, right? And then my math as well, right? And it became like a domino effect. The biggest pivotal point, right, was where N levels came. Back then, it was best 3 subjects. It was a different format. Then my English and humanities was really good, right? But luckily for me, because we were doing O-level E-math as well, so N levels was comparatively easier. I managed to score 3 points, 1 point for each, and that propelled me all the way to the top in my cohort, from nobody to a somebody, right? In all these small steps, right? And I realized that, oh my gosh, this is possible. I can do something, right? And all eyes were on me, right? But for me, right, it was a very internal drive. I wanted to do well. And for O levels, right, I got so crazy to the point that I, on my own accord, threw out my computer. I went to buy my own assessment books. I went to shop in Popular. I bought all the 10-year series, right? I hired my own tutors, right? My parents give the money, but I basically went to my classmates and say, your tutor, can you recommend to me, right? I did all this on my own accord because I was so driven to succeed, right? And my parents, obviously, they were worried, like, is something going wrong? Should I be concerned? but they were happy also. And to just cut you the long story short, I managed to succeed. I got first in my O levels as well for normal academic, right? It was a very big turning point for me, right? And yeah, so that was basically the U-turn, right? It was a short story, but in actuality, a lot more things happened, right? But in the interest of time, I won't be sharing so much with you. The thing that I want to reiterate is that for gamers, right, a lot of times that we turn to games, right, what are we trying to fulfill? Is it simply because we are addicted and the games got us, hooked, right? Or is it because we are looking for something more, right? What are we actually trying to achieve from there? For my part, I knew very well, right? I was looking for the affirmation, for someone to really recognize my ability, right? I wasn't happy, right, being in the gaming world, right? And basically my parents just looking at me like, you're addicted to games, right? It wasn't a nice feeling to me. But at that point of time, that was all I knew, right? If you ask me, my parents' perspective was, he didn't care about his studies. But I know my perspective and I knew that I cared. And if I could, I would. But I didn't know how, right? So that was something that I turned to back then, right? So I guess knowing all these player types is how then we can bridge the gap from virtual to reality, right? If they are meeting these needs in the virtual space, how can we then help them to perhaps, try to meet these needs in reality as well, right? So that's something to really think about, and I hope that my story really enlighten, or give you some insights in that area lah. So yeah, so this is some resource that we have, the player type test. We also have the my story on the right, which I wrote out in the blog post, which you can go and read, if you're interested to find out more lah, or you can ask me more questions. Feel free. Yes, so that's the end of my sharing. Maybe Olivia, maybe you can.
Yeah, that was wonderful. Thank you so much, Xing Yong, for sharing that story. And we're getting some very lovely comments in the chat as well, so you can take some time to read that. But in the meantime, Xing Yong, some follow-up questions. We have a few pertinent questions coming in from the group. And of course, you sharing your own story and the 4 personality types definitely comes in very handy when it comes to understanding and how best to harness, I guess, this dominant personality type into other areas of our child's life. And I guess some of us are, like as Mabel said, we're just waiting for that U-turn to happen as what happened with you. So one of the questions that we had was that, out of the 4 personality types, maybe some parents are thinking there's a type that is considered better or worse than the rest. Does that mean we should guide the child to a specific personality type? And a second part to that question is something asked by Lillian. Should we try to match the gamer profile to a specific game type? Something that Ruth brought up earlier.
For the second part, I think it's very clear that's something that they will match themselves. Naturally,
It all happens very naturally, right?
Yes, it's very organic. So if you ask me, right, I as an achiever, I will not touch any games that is single player that allows me to just play by myself to play against bots because I'm competitive. There's no way I won't. If you tell me that there's a certain puzzle game that can train your cognitive skills, your thinking. I'm an achiever, right? No matter how much the benefit weighs for me, right? If I'm not even interested, I won't even touch it with her, at all. So I think that's something that the gamers themselves will naturally gravitate towards. So that's the second part of the question. The first part of the question, I think it was, are there any
should we steer our kids to a personality type that parents may feel that is most useful in how they can apply that the way of thinking to other parts of the life?
We based in personality, right? In the personality research, the personality is largely very stable, right? It's something that they grew up, and it's formed in their formative years. So by the time we talk about in the adolescence years, the personalities will be roughly quite stable, right? Not that there can be much, not that there cannot be any changes, right? But it takes certain conditions, certain very extreme conditions and whatnot to basically shift the child's personality type. So there was something in the earlier question, in the question that you put also, which was, is there a particular player type that is better than the others? That's why we are trying to steer them towards one, right? The answer will be no, there's no player type. It's just each player type has their own different tendencies. And the way that we engage them is very different. So for example, when we talk about trying to engage a achiever like myself, the way that we engage them is a lot on affirmation and recognition, right? Tapping on their strengths. So when I talk to a child, when I talk to some of my clients, right, when I notice that they are an achiever, particularly an achiever type, I use a lot of strength tapping, right? Hey, you could do this in your games, right? I noticed that in your games you're very persevering, you don't give up, right? Is there a possibility that you can showcase that resilient type, in your gaming world as well, right? Helping them to break down if they're talking about trying to do well, right? Then how to help them to break down the particular studies, into smaller bite size so that it's something that is manageable, it's something that they can visualize as, okay, I can succeed in this, rather than just looking at the whole thing and just, it's too much for me. Yeah. So I guess in a long way, there's no particular best type.
See.
So
how do parents find out which personality type or which person? Because I believe Ruth already answered in the chat that one person can have several personality types, right? But how do parents identify which categories that their child falls into? Is it from observation, or can they get the information based on the games that their child is playing? For example, one of our participants is asking, is Minecraft for somebody who's a socializer?
One of the straightforward answer would be get your child to do the player type test. The player type test will basically show you the child's dominant type, right? As Ruth mentioned, there's a dominant type where I'm primarily achiever, but there are subtypes as well, right? So you have the child to do the test, which a lot of them will be very inclined to do, right? they're at the stage where they're trying to find their identity, right? It's very interesting to them. But if you are talking about, other ways to look at it beyond just, doing the test, one way that I normally do very straightforward is the game fun? Why do you play the game? Oh, it's fun for you. What's so fun about the game? When you dive into that, right, they will tell you, right? Oh, it's fun because I do very well in the game. I'm very strong and very powerful in the game. Okay, right? That sounds like an achiever, right? If I tell you, oh, I play because all my friends are playing, right? And I get to spend time with them. That tells you that they are the socializer, right? They tell you that the games allow me to really experiment out and try different things, right? And try different formulations, right? Then maybe they're a guru, right? If they simply love to find out more, the game is very interesting. It has this element, that element, da. Maybe that's an explorer, right? So for me personally, that's the understanding what is fun about it. That's the thing.
Okay. And so, let's say, because you also mentioned that, in finding out what personality type a child is, it also helps to enlighten a parent about some unmet needs that the child is getting from the game that he or she can't get in real life. So what is the best, what is your take? Or maybe can base it on personal experience, how do parents help how can they identify what is missing in the child's life, and how can they try to, work that out?
So at the core of it, when the child is playing excessively, right? Rather than looking at it as like, they are addicted, right? I'm not discounting that there might be addiction involved, right? But a lot of times when they are playing excessively, they're trying to look towards a particular need, right? In my particular case, I was trying to look for that affirmation and that relationship. So I guess it really boils down to having that communication, right? In my work with a lot of the youth, right, the ones who are on the deeper end, right? When I talk to them, right, why they are so deprived for achievement, or why are they so playing the game so much, trying to look for friends, right? A lot of times we find out that it's because they are unable to meet that in reality. They got bullied in school, right? Family circumstances are different, right? They're constantly being put down and criticized. So a lot of these factors really come out, right? And it always tells me, right? When we work with the gamers, right? When I work with the gamers, we come from a very needs perspective. What needs are they trying to fulfill, right? It always tells us that, these are the needs that may be unmet, right? That when we have that conversation, then a lot of these things spill out. That it goes just beyond the games being fun, but it's really they're trying to find that something that is missing in their real world, or they just don't know how to get there. Yeah. So I guess the player type really helps to steer us to that direction.
Is there a particular type that is more prone to addiction?
I don't have the stats for this, but from our experience, it's usually always the achievers. Simply from my personal experience working with a lot of the gamers, most of them tend to be achievers, right? And I mean, there's more research that needs to be done on this, but our take is that achievers, their particular personality type, they are more competitive, right? They compare their performance based on other players, right? So there's a need to always be better than the others. As a result, right, they are willing to spend so much time and energy compared to other players, right, just to try and achieve the outcome that they want, right? They'll be grinding, they'll be playing games after games after games, trying to reach that rank, right? Another factor that we talked about in achievers was the sense of frustration, right, that they are more susceptible to. So for them, a lot of the frustration, when they experience that sense of frustration, when they lose or whatever, it tends to lead to a lot of negative outcomes, such as, I want to play some more. Or maybe it creates a lot of conflicts in their relationships between their family members and their friends as well, right? And that perhaps brings, it's kind of like a stressor, and it brings the child to a point where I want the games to distract, to escape. So that's kind of how we see it so far.
Okay. There are As always, a lot of questions relating to addiction and how to cut down on a kid's gaming time. Before we move on to our next topic with Nick, Xing Yong, one last question for you. So this is by Eve, who's asking, who says that, her 15-year-old son she has categorized him as an achiever. He's very into Variant, or is it Valorant? I'm not so sure. Yes. So he shared with me his game, and in earlier days, liked me to watch him play as well. That's quite cute. Recently, his rank is Immortal, and told me that he has joined a group on the bench. So she's asking, what's your advice to prevent him from spending too much time? Maybe as a parent, you want to cultivate some enthusiasm for something that your kid really enjoys doing, but at the same time, you don't want to let it get into a stage where he's spending way too much time on it. And in this case, in Eve's case, her son, barely pulled through his end of year exams and, just managed to, get progress into secondary 3. So what is your advice on how to, yes, cultivate the enthusiasm, as I said, but, before it gets into addiction or gets into something that's considered excessive?
Right. So I at the end of it, right, just to address any of the other similar questions, it always comes down to boundaries and how we set it, right? I noticed that in the message he shared that, he really likes it when, she's able to watch him, right? And you really to recognize his ability, right? So it's through that relationship that they're able to enforce that kind of the boundaries that they need. I think Nick will basically address a little bit more on how to engage them. But for an achiever, knowing that, right, what drives them a lot is that affirmation, right? So how can we then, I'm guessing that if you want the child to, perhaps spend more of the time, towards the studies as well, right, to perhaps improve their studies and whatnot. So a lot of that is through the affirmation. So besides talking about the games, right, which I assume that you all have that open conversation because he's willing to share with you, right? That's important, right? Because that's in a way his identity and his worth. But then also talk about how, in his studies, right? Is there any personal goals that he's trying to meet? Maybe was he struggling, right, before this? He barely passed, and now he managed to pull through. Right? Maybe it was a very big thing to him, right? It was a goal achieved. Can we have that affirmation, right, to really tap on the strength and say, wow, what helped you through as well, right? How did you manage to reach that goal? So it's not just having the conversation in the games, but also to bring it towards the other areas of their life, and then tapping on the need for the affirmation, right? That's how I see it.
Fantastic, Xing Yong. So we are about halfway through this 3-hour session. We have an hour and a half left, just slightly under. So let's just take this opportunity to, maybe stretch our legs, get a little breather, but keep your questions coming in because we haven't really answered all of them yet. And I know you guys really, really want to know about how to manage that gaming time for your children, right? So keep them coming in. Before we get to our next speaker, Nicholas Gabriel Lim, I'd like to again ask for your help in the running of the Family Enrichment Society by donating generously. You'll be able to see information on that on the slide. That's right. So open your banking app, select the scan and pay option, scan the QR code with that, and make your donation. I just want to, on behalf of FES, thank you for that in advance. Again, if you're unsure about how to make this donation, you can always drop us a message in the chat group. And so just let you know, on our end, we are compiling all the questions, keep sending them in. They are very interesting ones, and some that I know you guys are just waiting to hear the answers to. So just we ask for your patience, and as we try to collate all of them together, and then we'll get them answered by our 3 speakers. Okay, and so we have just been joined by Nick Lim. Welcome, Nick. You've stayed quiet for quite a while. So we've covered quite a lot of ground so far, but it's time to hear from Nicholas Lim. He'll be speaking about how we can manage, how we can help our children form good, healthy gaming habits. He'll talk about game dependency, game addiction, and also give us his advice on if your child is already having trouble being disciplined about how much he or she spends on the computer, the console, or any other device. He'll also be able to give some advice on how to manage all of that. Nicholas, if you're ready, we'll hand it over to you. Everyone, I hope that wasn't a very long break, but I hope you managed to move around a little bit because we have about 90 minutes to go. So just hang in there. All right, Nick, over to you.
Thank you, Olivia. Let's do a sound check. Can you hear me good, Olivia?
I can, gotta be honest, you sound a little bit muffled. I know you were checking us. Yeah, you were checking in earlier. You were connecting audio-wise from another device, right? Maybe you wanna try that again?
Okay, give me a sec. Sound check. Can you hear me good?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Much better. Okay. Good morning, everybody. It's really nice to see everyone this morning. It's really glad to also be speaking alongside Ruth and Xing. It's always a pleasure. They make me feel very young. Yeah. I do play games when I was a lot younger. That was quite some time back already. But working with them really makes me energized, especially working with Xing on the ground with all the gamers. It's really exciting. Yeah, I dabbled in this gaming thing in the last 5 years at least, right? A little bit about myself first, I suppose. Okay, I've been working with adolescents for almost 20 years now. Still working with them, still see them on a day-to-day basis. I really enjoy working with them, and this work has brought me to various places, in the prisons, in the community, overseas, working with those who have behavior issues, learning difficulties, and very severe, I guess, broken relationships, right, with people that matters, families, educators, and so forth. Right, I really enjoy them, and I conduct all this consult, or I guess sharing, training, workshops on various platforms, even consult the government on various policies relating to youth, particularly in the Media Literacy Council and the National Council for Problem Gambling. Yeah, and I was saying earlier, my work with gaming only started the last 5 years or so, and that's when I got to meet Xing and Ruth, and we have really gotten our hands really dirty on the ground, really going to into the families, into the communities to actually help those in need, and we've developed quite a bit of resources. If you come back website, right? I put together the game dependency, I guess, test, right? Together with Xing as well, the personality type profiling, the gamer type profiling. And like mentioned, this Xing alluded to earlier, we are currently doing a research with SIT, one of the professors there, helping us to validate our anecdotal experience about whether or not violent gaming, has to do, sorry, not violent gaming, as in achievers who are more prone to violent games, right? That's something you want to validate our experience, so akan datang for that one. We want to really confirm, our hypothesis. Yeah. Disclaimer, as much as I will be sharing from research, but a lot of my sharing is about my personal experience, right? Guided by research, and I only look to research to guide my practice, right? So my assumption here is that all of you would have read information, and that should guide you along with my presentation, my sharing this morning, as well as assuming that you also read up a little bit more, okay, to this, because what I'm sharing is really a snapshot, and in my view, is very fundamental as far as understanding our young people, our kids are concerned. And from my view as well, if you are having any difficulty managing them, engaging them, right, the sharing this morning is really to level you up very quickly to engage them positively, right? And those of you on the other, almost towards the end of the spectrum where you really don't know what to do, you're desperate. Hopefully you will apply this morning's sharing as much as possible. If you need help, reach out to myself or Yong, and I'll be happy to support you along the way. Okay, and as a result of that, it's not possible for me to share everything, and therefore stay with me throughout this entire time. Whatever I'm speaking about will be the material. It's on my ebook. It's compiled over this last decade of doing this presentation, right? And you can find all the information I'm sharing this morning on my ebook, on my website, on my webpage. Okay. And also, if you're interested, complementing my I guess my sharing this morning are other experts in the field who have, well, we have been working for many years, and they have actually generously allowed me to record interview with them, and I'm making that available to you. Okay, so if you can access their interview, and then you can actually learn a lot from these real experts, and they are in the field with young people for many years, right? Like myself. Yeah, so these are available resource for you. All right, and again, this is basically the information that I'm sharing this morning with you. Okay, it can be found all in this book. All right. Okay, so to go immediately dive straight into addressing or talking about the elephant in the room, and then you asked a lot about the addiction. Is my child addicted? What am I going to do about it? Now, before you all jump the gun, as a mental health practitioner, I need to really, I guess, caution you all, parents, right, especially, to not be too quick to put a label on your child, regardless of what it is. In this case, we're talking about gaming addiction, right? I'm going to walk you through the criteria in which we use as mental health practitioners, right, to assess whether somebody is addicted, right? And this is the tool that we use, DSM-5, right? And as I go through these 9 items that we use to assess our clients, I want you to think about your child. It's not meant for you to diagnose your child, okay? It's meant for you to be, I guess, comforted, right? In my experience and seeing your experience as well, when parents come to us and they say that they are addicted, 90% to 98% of the time they are not addicted, right? We can say they're dependent. That's why it's dependency test that we actually developed, but they are not addicted, right? And why it's not addicted? Because you need to meet certain criteria to be addicted. Okay, so I'm going to go through that with you. And if going through this, your child meets the criteria, and then it's like screening test, right? And it meets the criteria of being addicted, right? Then start reaching out to professionals for help, right? So that you'll be able to get the much needed support. Okay, so here we go. Hang on, huh? Okay, sorry, we disrupted there a little bit. Okay, here we go. So the 9, as we go through the 9 items, what you need to look out for is that the items out of 9, there must be 5 of the following items that must be met, and it must be met within a 1-year duration, right? 1-year duration, 12 months. Okay, here we go. First item is preoccupation or obsession with internet gaming. Right, preoccupation basically means to the point of everything else is excluded. Right, constantly talking about it, constantly thinking about it. There's a lot of feelings towards it, and extremely distracted, and to the point where everything else is parked aside. Right, what used to be something that they're interested in, possibly playing with the neighbors, going out with the family, reading their own book, now becomes something that's all parked aside on the shelf, right? And it's only preoccupied by social media or the game. Withdrawal symptoms when not playing internet games, very frustrating, very, I guess, very agey, cannot sleep, don't want to eat, overstill. We know some of them don't even shower, don't brush their teeth, right? These are things that are telltale signs. Next one, a build-up of tolerance, more time need to be spent playing the games, right? It started out with like 5 minutes, then half an hour, 1 hour, still reasonable, right? To 2 hours, still reasonable, right? But by the time it hits like, half a day or full day, right? The time keeps increasing. And as much as you try to negotiate with them, it's very difficult, right? For you to not come back down, right? So for some families, it becomes quite extreme already. It's very difficult to manage all these kind of behaviors, right? So also, once again, seek professional help, right? The person has tried to stop or curb playing, in this case, your child stop playing games, but has failed to do so. There are many many attempts to stop. It hasn't been successful to a point where, what we call learned helplessness, right? They have adopted by this time some unhealthy strategies, not helpful at all. So the only way is to carry on with the strategies in which they are very comfortable with, right? You're still going back to the game, right? Maybe by this time, a lot of violence involved in terms of like hitting out at family members. So we have dealt with families where their kids start to use violence on their parents, right? And that's something, well, very sad, right? But still can be helped, okay? Still can be helped. So don't be disheartened, right? If you know of families like that. Next one. Now, your child has had a lot of interest in other activities, right? Like mentioned earlier, something along the lines of like something they've been constantly doing, right? Like spending time with you, having conversations, going for ice cream, right? But all these things have take a step back, right? Your child has a continued overuse of internet games, even with the knowledge of how much they've impacted their life. So despite you having to, show them the videos, right? That Ruth and Xing probably shared with you earlier. You talk to them about pros and cons, give them a lot of, I guess, articles to read, talk to them already, but they know all this there already, but it's no use, right? They're not using those information, right? The person so your child lied to you, not once, not 2 times, but 3 times, right? And this is one of the things that we talked about earlier about learned helplessness. At the end of the day, the way to help myself is to lie, right? So this unhealthy behavior of lying is not helping them at all, right? So it's learned helplessness, one of the behaviors we consider learned helplessness. So they use this to survive or continue to fuel their gaming behavior, right? Your child use internet games to relieve anxiety or guilt. So there's some degree of guilt, anxiety, because they know they're supposed to study, do their homework, but they're not. So they are guilty about it. They don't know what to do. What they do, they go on the internet, play games, and what have you, even social media. And the person has lost, the child has lost, or put at risk and opportunities or relationship because of the internet games. Therefore, your child, as a result of all the things we talk about, would even risk their relationship with you. People who matter to them, like their grandparents, for example, their siblings. Once upon a time, the relationship is very good, but now it's reached a point, where it doesn't matter anymore. Even I would risk having to not live with my parents. I can even live, run away, even whack them for that matter, right? And I think that would be justified, and that would probably be how they will rationalize it. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So out of this 9, how many of you type in the chat? Okay. Olivia and team will be able to help me, identify how many of you, right, feel that your child is addicted. The criteria here is that you need to fulfill 5 of this 9 in a 12-month period, right? Broadly speaking, let's say me, or raise the hands. Let's do hands up, then we can just have a snapshot of where we are as a whole group today. Okay, addicted, that means your child would have met 5 of these 9 items in a 12-month period. All right. Okay, I see some hands going up. Yeah. Some said face. Okay. All right. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay. Okay, this quick snapshot here. This is what I expected to. All right. Just looking at only the screens. Number of hands going up. Right. That is typically what I get as well. Meaning to say that by and large, right, very few of you would have your kids who are actually addicted and would need professional help. Right? But by and large, they fall into the category of chances are they are dependent. Right, they're not addicted, they don't meet the criteria, but now there's some concern that we need to start proactively taking action. And very good, if you are in that space, kudos to you. This is like, flagging putting up the flag and say, oh, okay, something's not right, or there's a chance that things will become worse. Now it's time to take action. Yes, most of you would fall into that category. Okay, and that's exactly what this sharing this morning is about, for you to be able to engage them. Right, those of you who put your hands up, and have acknowledged the fact that your child may be addicted, like I said earlier, right? Don't panic, right? Don't be anxious. There's always help available. Reach out to Xing and I, and we'll be able to guide you, and even for some, handhold you throughout the way. Okay, and whatever that we're going to share, I'm going to share this now, right? Is to help you now immediately apply at home with your child, right? And still not strain the relationship. And it's very key, and please take note of my sharing moving forward from this point. And largely, I'd like to acquaint you this particular chemical in our brain that's primarily responsible for causing our child, causing is a strong word, but nonetheless put it in a very understandable way. If you have to blame somebody or blame something, this would be something that you want to be acquainted with, and it's not something that your child can control on one level, right? This is something we call the happy chemical, dopamine, right? And that's something that makes us, our child, more so our child, you find out why later, more so our child do not be able to control his or her behavior when it comes to gaming, because this gets fired up and it fuels your child's brain and both entire body systems, and they usually cannot control and manage this effect in their body at this stage of their life. And what they need to do is to learn how to manage this, and they need our help, parents' help, the adults' help to manage this. And this is just one, by the way, right? Notwithstanding the fact that there's actually the hormonal, the hormones that are actually going through their body at this point in their life, and there's a lot of biological change and movement and shift. Right? At the same time, also, there's also it's a fact that developmentally in their brain, they're not fully developed, right? And that's the perspective in which I'll be sharing with you. And it's evidence-based, and I feel that that is something you need to be quickly acquainted with. I've alluded to this earlier. If you want to know the test, if your child is dependent, come to the website. It's basically the same link on come back. And I want to affirm parents, from another perspective, right? These are things that we accumulated from parents all every time that we do this. Okay, you have told me about what you have been doing and all some of the issues that you have at home with your kids, right? From gaming during meal times, excessive gaming, breaking the rules, not doing their homework, coop up in their room, close their doors, right? No idea what your child is doing. They basically don't talk to you anymore, right? These are all your concerns, right? And these are what I call symptoms or manifestation of, in this case, gaming behavior, right? Or gaming addiction or gaming dependency, right? And some of you asked earlier as well, and you're not alone on this, right? Anything wrong with gaming? Anything wrong with using mobile devices, and what makes it wrong or bad, right? And essentially, gaming and mobile devices are really not wrong, right? Even creators, the founders of all the social media companies, even the tech companies will tell you that, they wouldn't allow their kids to use them extensively. And there's always, boundaries for those things, right? And similarly, we want to be able to appreciate that as well. And for our own family's sake, our kids' sake, we want to appreciate that reality that all these things are really not wrong. It's meant for a purpose, right? For business, for learning, for improving our mental health and so on and so forth. What makes it wrong is how we use it. or what makes it bad is how we use it, right? And from that, we want to appreciate this reality, all right, of our own, what you can control, all right, in terms of your response. What you cannot control in response to all this are the following, right? Schools intensified usage of devices and online engagements. The gaming industry is really pushing out, investing a lot of money to do this, making it really almost like AI. We understand about metaverse now, right? The value of online content is like, whoa, swarming the space. How can you control that? You really cannot control that, right? And talk about whether it's good or bad, right? How can you even control this, right? But what you can control, basically the long hours, right? Where you express those concerns, right? Those things, some of them are in your control. Like for example, not sleeping late, eating your meals regularly, eating nutritious food. It makes your kids unable to manage their time, be more responsible now, right? Learning how to prioritize, right? If there's distraction, how do you help them, to overcome those distractions, and so on and so forth. These are things that you can control. Then you may ask me, hey, Nick, I've been doing all that already, then how, right? Yeah, that's precisely our conversation. It's not what you do. Yeah, a lot of you are doing a lot of right things, and that's why I say I like to affirm you and to commend you for doing all the things like that you say that you have been doing, even captured in my previous 2 slides, right? 2 slides before this, about what you are doing as a result of the concern that you have over your child, all right? But it's also how you do it. And a lot of the times in our experience, right, is actually how you execute your, your management, your engagement, your discipline over your kids, right? For example, limit Wi-Fi, cut their credit, in terms of being able to buy things, right? Take away their handphone, incentivize them on other things. If you do your work well or you score certain marks, then you're able to get this from mommy and daddy, set up passwords. All these are what we are doing. And I must give credit to you because they are very good strategies, right? It's not what you do, it's how you do it, all right? And what do I mean by that, all right? And after this slide, I'll talk about it immediately. At the same time, while all these things are happening and dealing with it, we need to recognize, and Xing alluded to that as well. He used the word unmet needs, right? And that is something that comes up sometimes that some of you, the parents, will be able to identify. You'll probably observe things like lack of self-confidence, a bit of tiredness, demoralized as a result of, they're not doing well in school or in life, right? A certain negative outlook, now constantly using a lot of negative words, and so on and so forth. These are things that comes alongside, all right, situations at home where you see them playing a lot, but you also hear these things coming up. Right? I want to sensitize you to this at this point. This one slide here is to help you now put the big picture together and not just look at, oh, it's a gaming problem, it's a gaming addiction, all right? Or that it's really concerning. I want you to see in a bigger light, right? The bigger picture. So with that, my question to you is this. Now, let me back up this a little bit. Don't get too excited. So let me ask you this. Then why then do our kids behave the way they behave, specifically constantly on the internet, constantly watching their videos, constantly playing games, not one game but 2 games, then despite having to put them all the boundaries there, are not helping. Some of us in extreme cases, right, even becomes very vulgar, very unkind in their words, not compassionate, not thoughtful, and so on and so forth. Okay, why, right? Now, the following few slides are extreme. It's extreme examples of young people's behavior, right? I'm deliberately highlighting extreme behavior to illustrate the point about us appreciating the way they are, developmentally speaking, why our kids behave the way they behave. You keep asking the question, parents, I see all your slides there, right? Right. So is gaming the problem? Game causing the problem, really? Then how do you explain then things like they are into, like, say, cosplay, into their drugs, into gangs, into pornography, into so many other things, right? It's likened to the same thing. Gaming is, it's just one of the many so-called vices, right? But why do they go into that, right? So the following examples are meant to help you appreciate it. Right? And again, I say it's extreme cases, but I want you to tell me why are young people like that. In this one example, it is my student, right? Quite some years ago already. All right. The picture that you see here is the victim. All right. Victim of burn. So in the Christmas of 2004, what happens is that my student was meeting his friends in Orchard Road, right? And they're coming together and they're having a good time. And this particular boy that you see, my student was 15 years old then, right? And this boy is actually 14 years old, and they're having a good time. But this boy brought my student's ex-girlfriend together for the gathering, and it was meant to provoke my student, right? His ex-girlfriend, right? So what happens is that this boy, 14-year-old, his name is Tim, right? Decided to, poke fun at my student. And my student told him, hey, don't be like that, lah, right? Stop provoking me. But Tim didn't want to continue to stop, continue provoking my student. So my student challenged him, say, if you got the guts, you stay down here, I'll come back. Shortly, within like 20 minutes, half an hour later, right? My student, this guy took a bottle of kerosene, throw onto this boy, right? And used his lighter, took out his lighter, and just lit this 14-year-old on fire, all right? So my student was actually 15 years old, right? He stopped coming to school. That's when I stopped seeing him in later part of the year, all right? But he was charged and caught up by the law the following year at 16 years old, and he was charged as an adult, right? With 6 years in prison, 24 strokes of the cane, right? The question here is, why did he do this? So as the newspaper reported, right? Well, this 14-year-old decided that they're just fooling around. My student said he was jealous, right? The question for us is, why does the 14-year-old want to continue doing this despite being told, right, that I don't like this, but I will still, want to proceed with this, right? And his reason was just fooling around, right? Was he even considering, my student's threat? As for my student is concerned, right? Jealous only, but has he even considered why he would even go to the extent of using such extreme measures, right? To actually use kerosene to light another young fella up on fire and using a lighter? Was there consideration to the action, the solution, right? And even the consequence, right? The question is, why? Was there even any consideration? Okay, next one. All right, this is not my student, but it's reported. And I also deliberately pull out stories, right, over a span of time, right? Also to illustrate the point, all right? And you notice from 2004, 2016, it's also like all the way, even time to year, they just illustrate the point that young people are the way they are for a reason, regardless of which year they're in, regardless of whether or not it's our grandfather's time, whether it's now, whatever it is. I'm talking about developmental growth, developmentally where they are. In this example, it's not my student, but it's a story of the kids having to want to come together to settle an issue. Good reasons, good intention. But it ended up with them having to fight, right? Why? Because, right, there was no consideration, not thinking properly, about what was happening at that point in time. There was no consideration to the consequences, right? When they are together, they start to, things start to happen and evolve, and they begin to feel angry, stupid, or that I feel stupid when, I was attacked or insulted, right? And that led me to take certain actions without consideration of the consequences. Why? The question here is why, right? Parents or everybody. Next one, right? Teen who attack foreign workers, again, out of boredom, right? Without even consideration to the consequences, right? I thought they will not fight back, right? This is basically something that happened as a result of this them feeling bored. This is my student. I can talk about this now. This is a Facebook post. All of us mostly, right? But those who are here attending today, don't talk about the young people, our students, our clients, right? They don't use Facebook anymore. But in the days, we used to use Facebook, and our kids also use Facebook. And this is something that we captured after a day of program in the school. Now, I've changed the name, obviously, for privacy reasons, but I would like you to take note of the thing that's going on, the things that they say. Right? It's a bit colloquial, a bit dialect. Those of you who don't understand, I will just help you with this. My student is BB man, and just note what he's saying, okay? Now, sell already, is it? No. Sell already means you crazy, is it? Okay? No, I already got sit down. I did sit down, and I did calm myself and think about this. No fake, I'm not lying. Hey, bro, you today already sort plugged it. That means, are you crazy? Are you out of sorts? right? Now still continue. So we can tell from this that there's something happened earlier in the day. Right? You think worth it or not. So there's something was going on already. Right? It's brewing, right? It's heating up. And this sentence is just a scammer. Then my student says, oh, I don't know, IDK. But believe me, it's not worth it. Right? So there's some suspicion here that there is, my student is thinking of some form of solution that's not good. Right? Maybe worth it. If I die, I will protect all of you. So there's some consideration of hurting himself, taking his own life. Right? Suicide in extreme case. You can die after 22nd August 2111. So obviously the friends that you're trying to talk him out of it. Right? And I totally agree. And then the last comment was, laugh out loud, see imokia, right? Laughing out loud, and then you crazy emotional kid, right? So what the question to us here is, why would my student consider such a solution? Was there a consideration of the consequence, right? And how come it's so heated up, right, to a point where it's regardless of what my friends are saying to me, it's not worth it. I think my solution is the best, right? And we would think, what would be the next step? You know, you think my student will actually do, right? So by protocol, obviously, I would have to, you know, together with my team, working with this group of young people, we have to immediately reach out to him, you know, and to really find out what's happening, and we did exactly that, right? And then to address the issues that he was going through. Right, and last but not least, one example also, this is a book written together by another researcher, but written by Professor Angeline Quay, a retired professor at National Institute of Education, who I worked closely with previously, right? Close to retirement age, right? She decided to study the behavior of gamers. So what does she do? She basically go and start playing games, right? And go into the gaming world. And when she did that, she chanced upon this incident online, right, between James and his parents, whereby there was a huge argument between James, who's playing the game online, and the parents trying to get him off his computer game. And it was so tough. There was like a lot of like arguing, to a point where at the recording, right towards the end, you see bashing, throwing of the computer, plugging out you can literally hear the computer terminal being trashed, right? The question to us is this: why is it so difficult to get our kids off when they are on the computer game? Right? No matter how parents want to threaten, even to rationalize with your child, it's not going to work. Right? In extreme cases, when both parents and child are very emotional, it will be very disastrous, and that's something that not something that we will encourage. Okay, especially you want to engage your child and try to get a child off gaming, right? But question here to us is why? Why are they like that, right? And why is that the tension there between adult and the child? Okay, now, why? Parents, answers. It has to do with the brain, right? If you could contribute to the learning here and the discussion here by, you know, just throwing out your ideas, your thoughts about why behaviors like that, why do they not consider, you know, the consequences? Why, you know, when parents are and kids are entering this discussion about having to manage time, gameplay, right? There's always this tension. In extreme cases, wow, devastating outcomes, right? Why is it the case? Yeah, exactly. It's good to see all that, and then, yes, it's true. And let's dive into it. I just picked up one or two things, and I'm gathering that you can appreciate the fact that it has to do with the development of the brain, and it's exactly right. Okay, right. But it's not a technical discussion here this morning. It's more to acquaint you on two aspects of the brain which you must really know about, and in wanting to manage, you know, supervise, you know, teach, empower your kids. Right. The first part of the brain is basically this prefrontal cortex, and this part of the brain is primarily responsible for helping us make decisions, right? Planning ahead, considering, you know, our impulses, our behaviors, right? And to should I do this or should I not? Should I do that or not? Right. This is the part of the brain, right, that's primarily responsible for that. Right. And the key thing to take note here, parents, is that this part of the brain is not fully developed until the age of 25 years old, plus minus. Okay. And to help us appreciate this part of the brain is actually the brakes, right? So in considering our actions, like for example, my student wanting to take out like a bottle of kerosene, I mean, what are you thinking, right? This part of the brain that will consider that. What am I thinking, right? Of all things, why carrots? What consequences? If something happens, right? This is the part of the brain that considers those things. Yeah. Now, the next part of the brain that you want to be familiar with, parents, is actually the limbic system, right? This is actually, there are many parts to this, but broadly, they are actually the thalamus, the hypothalamus, okay, the hippocampus, and the amygdala. Yeah. Now, this four aspects of these four areas of the limbic system primarily regulates one, the incoming signals. So if there was a threat, how do I receive and understand the threat, right? How does it relate to other parts of my brain? That's one. Number two, the hypothalamus, right? It regulates the body functions like sleep. So this is the one I was sharing you earlier about at this stage of the life, the hormones are raging. This is the part of the brain, the hypothalamus, that regulates, right? The hormones in the brain, hormones in the body as well. Right? And that would include things like, sex, eating, hunger, and so on and so forth. The other part of the brain is actually, the other part of the limbic system is actually this called hippocampus, where it's the place where memories are stored. And this applies to not just good memories, but also bad memories. Okay. So for example, if there was violence in extreme case in a house, I was constantly fearful about, how, things will happen for me, whether I was lying, whether I was stealing, or whether I was bad to my kid, my siblings, that kind of thing, right? And whatever consequence that comes on me or even to my siblings, if it's something that I don't welcome, appreciate very much, I go into a, I guess, defense mode, always constantly fearful. I don't feel safe, right? The opposite is true as well. If I constantly am empowered, it's always very affirmative from my parents. That's the response that I get from, the people who care for me. Those are stored in memories, all right? And alarm system. So as a result of those memories and the signal that I'm getting, that's where this part of the brain in the limbic system, right, the amygdala, alerts me to either fight or flight, to run away, right? And this connects emotional meaning to it, right? It tells me that, oh, okay, actually this is risky. This will cause danger to me. I will be harmed, or this will actually be very beneficial for me, right? This is something I want to do more, right? So the meaning is connected. And this part of the brain, the limbic system, right, primarily promotes survival, all right? And it responds very quickly. And the connections, right, between limbic system and the motor development part of our function, right? Our body develops very early. So you can, imagine, remember when you were young, you see our kids very young, when they're hungry, we will cry, we will run for, they will eat anything they can get their hands on, or they will fight back, or steal back their friends or siblings' toys, or to run away without any considerations, about the outcomes of it, because certain things tell them that I need to either run or fight, whatever it is, right? Survival, effectively, okay? And then the prefrontal, only the prefrontal cortex, right, can control or regulate this rapid and impulsive processing. So that's why we call the brakes, right? So if I'm angry, if I am upset, and I just act out, right? This is the part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, will be able to tell me, hey, hold on, right? So the control part, right, comes from the prefrontal cortex. So this this neural connection between the limbic and the prefrontal, right? There's a window, right, to which it's available for us to help the child make the connection, for the child to learn to adopt the braking strategies, right, the prefrontal strategies. As opposed, and otherwise, if they're not taught that, right, then they will always be, quote unquote, right, operating, reacting, responding from the limbic. And we want to teach them more and more every time on a day-to-day basis, strategies that they could learn from the prefrontal and then connect them from the limbic. All right. And it takes a while, okay, the window period, and it's about 10 years. All right. And age 5 to adolescents, windows or opportunities for development. So from another way of looking at this, right, this window then becomes an opportunity for us to teach them, becomes an opportunity for them to learn, as opposed to saying that, oh my goodness, gaming is really taking a toll on us, and if we are looking only on the negatives, right? If you look at it another way, it's really an opportunity for them to learn, right? And for them to learn effectively, who best would be better to help them and teach them? I would be us, the parents, right? Or obviously any adult working with young people, right? So to put it in perspective, the prefrontal cortex begins to develop during puberty. right? So about where your kids are mostly at in terms of like either 13 years old, 14 years old, right? Developmentally speaking, right, the girls will mature a lot younger. So thereabouts, we're looking about 9, 10 years old upon the onset of puberty. Boys will be about 10, 11 years old, right? The limbic system is fully developed around this stage, right? The onset of puberty. And the prefrontal will be about 11 to 24 years old, plus minus 3 or 5 years old. What will be the factors contributing to this range? There are a few, okay? One is the environment, right? Environment in terms of like, if there was constant violence involved in the household, right? That would set the brain to constantly look out for their own safety, right? And that will stunt the development of the brain, right? As opposed to if it was a nurturing environment, right? And the brain doesn't have to constantly think about, you know, having to fight or fend for themselves, you know, to ensure their safety. And then there's more room for the brain, right, to basically develop, right? Yeah, so that's one. The other one is nutrition. I mean, some of us will be able to take, you know, good food, you know, have the opportunity and have the means and resources to basically, you know, help ourselves grow well with good nutritional valued food. And that does help as well in the development of the brain, right? So these are some of the factors, among many others, I'm sure, that affects the development of the brain. So therefore, the range, that would account for the range. It's not like die 25 years old, oh, they're fully developed. Sometimes adults also, by the age of like, you know, 28, you know, 30, even the most recent research, right, I chanced upon in the last 1, 2, 3 months, right, are showing that even adults in their 40s and 50s don't have fully developed prefrontals, right? So it's possible for a number of reasons. All right. So with that, I'd just like to highlight the fact that this is a window of opportunity, all right? And this is developmental, not something that you can control, not something that the kids can control, because it's just part of development. And that's why it spans across time, regardless of whether my grandfather days or even now, it's part of growth and development. Therefore, if there is a lack of this appreciation, this understanding, then no matter how we try to actually engage our child, the way that we feel is best to engage our child, and it ends up, you know, in a situation where it's so difficult to engage them and to have meaningful conversations and build deeper relationships. Right? This is why. And in my book, and I wrote the ebook, right, it's a clash of the mind, and it's a constant clash, especially during this 10-year period. Right, I'll leave it as that for now, and I'll quickly just go into this number of research or group of research, I would say, right, which a lot of you brought up earlier. Xing was talking about it as well. So did Ruth, about, you know, how does the game impact our kids, our brain specifically, right? Addressing the part about aggression and violence and everything else. So there's a category, one category of research that talks about that teenagers who are more susceptible to aggression, right, are those that are easily upset, depressed, have little concern for others, break rules, and act without thinking. Right, teenagers who are highly neurotic, less agreeable, and less conscientious have a greater propensity to be negatively affected by violent video games. Right, so one category of research talks about that, and they talk about video games are harmless, right, for a vast majority of kids. So it's very safe to say there are almost like more than 300 of you here. Very safe to say almost 80% of you, right, 90% of your kids will not be affected, right, by the aggressive nature or violent nature of the games, right? So aggression is not related to violent video content, but to feelings of failure and frustration. On top of what I was sharing you in the previous slide, right? There's disposition, there are predisposing factors, okay? Okay, so that's one group, right? As far as aggression is concerned, you know, as far as the the vulnerability, yeah, of our kids, right? When exposed to violent video games content. The other category is basically gamers who consistently outperform their non-gamers, right, counterparts in performing visual attention leadership. So this is the area of having to see the value of gaming, and there is a positive impact, right, on this thing called visual attention. Games like Halo or Counter-Strike, the one that has like rapid responses and requires you to have undivided attention, right, to visual information. Right, increase the visual attention, the ability to, you know, see so many things in one screen and pay attention to almost every single thing, and it basically helps us develop that ability, right, to focus. So the implications of this, right, will be improving visual attention, right, used in military training and therapeutic treatments for certain visual impairment, right, and use that in therapy as well in clinical settings. And the last category of research talks about the increase in brain volume, right, and playing real-time game strategies such as like Super Mario 64, and increase the brain gray matter, right, and increases which part of the gray matter? You're talking about the right hippocampus. Hippocampus, look at that, right? Right prefrontal cortex, guys. Hippocampus is actually in the limbic system, right? And cerebellum, right? So this group of research talks about the implication on the prefrontal and the limbic, exactly what we're talking about. So therefore, you should answer some of the questions as to why some of our kids really don't have that self-control, and they get lured into it and increase in dependency and some into addiction. And one part of the brain also that's affected in terms of gray matter, right, is the cerebellum. It's right at the back of our head, right? And that's where this part of the brain is primarily responsible for our balance, our sense of being able to have a function of having to appreciate, right, different degrees of severity, a sense of balance, essentially. Like for example, if you play Counter-Strike, and if this part of the brain is not fully developed, you will not be able to play Counter-Strike very well, because like my personal experience playing Counter-Strike, for example, like it's so fast moving, right, that I just feel giddy and headache immediately, right? And the part of the brain that's responsible for that, right, is this cerebellum. Okay. All right. So now putting all of that together, the first part talking about the limbic prefrontal, and now knowing some degree of, the three categories of the impact of our kids' brain, right? We need to now learn the implication of these things, right? And the following four implications are such. We need to now begin to appreciate that our brain is actually under construction, more so during this stage of their lives, our kids' lives, right? Everything that you learn or do stimulates the growth of the brain, right? If you look at this three columns here, right? This is basically what happens in our brain. When there is a behavior that's being learned, you will see black lines, black dots, dark ones, right? And that happens at the early stage of the child's life, right? And as they enter adolescence, right, around the stage of 7, and where we are talking about right now, about 10, 11, 12, it's a lot of white lines, a lot of black lines. Why? Because they're learning so many things and they're stimulated. And if they engage in this stimuli, in this case, it could be games, it could be like the social media, videos, and whatever it is, and they keep going back to it. The going back to it forms that black line, right? That's the behavior that's being formed, right? And increasingly, as they enter into, adolescent 15 years and above, right, you begin to see, and adults more so, you see less of these black lines. Why? Because that's how we learn as human beings, right? That we self-select things that are particularly interesting, that we want to learn more. Everything else that we don't want to learn, that's not interested, it all takes a backseat. All right, and then you have them, all the so-called the neural pathways, right? The black lines all fall away and they literally disappear. And what remains and what sticks are those that are repeatedly being done, right? So keep going back to the gaming, or keep having to lie, or keep having to do certain things. That those things that you keep repeating forms this black line. The implication or the understanding of this is that, right, if we are learning, and the more we learn, the better we get, right? And that's basically the mastery that Xing was talking about, right? It's very different when you talk about mastery. So the deeper, the darker the black lines, you by right, will have develop some mastery in those behaviors. Right? Sometimes it's just what we call it addiction, right? Because why addiction comes about? Why? It's because you constantly do it to a point, right? That particular behavior persists, right? And therefore addiction or dependency, right? And the reverse is true. The other implication is that the teens in the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed. Why is it not fully developed, right? If you understand neuroscience, right, your parents, the neural connections forms from the back to the front. So it's not the physical side of the brain that is actually not present. It's not fully developed. In fact, the whole structure of the brain is fully developed already at a very young age when a child is born, right? At some age. But we're talking about the neural connections, not when we talk about not fully developed. Right? Therefore, it will take a while for the neural connections to fully form, to be fully connected over a period of time. Therefore, we need to learn strategies to help the child develop that connection, build that connection, right, at a fast rate or at a better rate with very good repetition, healthy routines, such that the neural connections get formed at an early stage, And that neural connection I was talking about between the limbic and the prefrontal, right? It gets strong and gets myelinated. Right? What is myelination I'm talking about? It's like if you recognize like a wire, right, that we use, right? The inside is the copper wire, the outside is the insulator, right? And the outside the insulator, the rubber protects the copper wire inside. Exactly that. The myelin is the insulator that's covering the copper wire. So in our brain, if we do it something often enough, that whole insulator that covers the signal that goes through the copper wire in our brain, right, gets thicker and thicker, it gets myelinated, and therefore that behavior gets fixed. It becomes a fixed behavior, it becomes a habit, right? It becomes addiction that we're talking about, that dependency behavior. Yeah, so they can basically do silly things, right? Do you ever do things that you really regret? So therefore we expect that our kids, no matter how much you tell them, today you tell them once, they will also make a mistake later on, 1 hour later, or even tomorrow. We need to manage ourselves. So they are constantly developing, right? And they learn, right, through feelings, quote unquote, they think through their heart, right? They think through their limbic system. Therefore, remember I was talking about all the what that you do. As you execute that, you need to, it's the how you execute it, right? You need to execute in a way that relates to them, where they feel it, and they can connect with you relationally, emotionally. Then it makes sense. And it is true also when you are punishing them. If you want to help them to learn something, to be able to connect that severity of that mistake or whatever it is, preferably for it to stick, there needs to be some relational, emotional element to it, the limbic strategy that we're talking about. Okay, the limbic response that you want to have with your child. And strong emotional experience impact the formation of development. So, and it applies to both, right, good and bad, right, emotional experience. So if there's constant, right, fear, right, of my own safety, there's a constant beating on bashing me up, negative experience, right, and constant fear, I learn something, and it sticks with me, and it will be there for a long time. And the reverse is true. If it's positive, it's constant affirmation, it's very nurturing, you know, and I learned that, and the brain is disposed to having to, you know, constantly look out for positive learning and positive experience, you know, and the brain just learns very quickly, right? And therefore, helping youth to change is much easier than helping adults change as a result of that. Why? Because when it's set, remember the first implication, right? When the black lines are being formed, it becomes a habit, and we develop a certain way of thinking or behaving. Wow, to unchange that, if you notice the third column previously, right? It's only a few black lines. There's little that you turn to, right, to adopt a different strategy or a different way of thinking of things. It's very difficult for the grown person, the adult, or the kids who are in the later years of development to actually change, right? So most critical task for kids is to learn, right, through some degree of stimulation. And it's so possible for us as adults to develop that, but it's a lot harder, okay? And this is to illustrate the point that, you know, I mean, I've worked with adults who are like that, right? And I'm sure you have experience working with adults, mind you, adults, who what we call overage teenagers, right? Who basically constantly go back to a limbic space and adopt limbic response as adults, right? To respond to even other adults, and we're still with their kids, and it's very unhealthy. So in the example I cited earlier about Prof. Angeline Khoo, right? And that's exactly what happens in a overall age teenager, right? As an adult, you should be in a better position, you know, to immediately change your strategy. But if you reach to a point where you're engaging your child emotionally, right, it will only escalate, right? And you will escalate to a point where parents hear this, you will lose, and the situation will be a lose-lose situation. And what do I mean by that? A lose-lose situation basically means they reach a point where no matter how much you try to get your child to sit down with you, to engage in the conversation, to constructively discuss things, which I would question, why didn't you do it earlier? But if you reach to that point, the child will never come to you, right? And they will seek for solutions elsewhere from other people. And that's what I mean lose-lose, all right? So rule of thumb, as far as working adolescents are concerned, is that you never engage them limbically, right? And to frame never engage them limbically when they are negative. That means it's like angry or sad or frustrated, and it frustrates you as well, and you are totally angry, and you know, especially during this time of COVID, right? And they are just all over you in the house, you know, and you are focusing on the meeting and everything else, and it just frustrates you, and you are boiling up. And as you're boiled up, you just engage them in limbic, and then it's, you know, it's just going to escalate. Right? It's not healthy at all. Right? So to frame it up, I would like to put this in whatever I discussed in summary, like this, in this manner. I've only focused our discussion this morning, right, on this thing called the limbital way, right? The psychosocial development theories are not discussed, or I at least alluded to them, but those are easy to, I guess, find and get acquainted with. But what's usually in our experience, in my personal experience while working, it's not, it's not instinctual, it's not normal, not automatic that we get to this appreciation of the development stage in terms of the brain development. Despite numerous amount of research or neuroscience research that shows that, hey, hello, our young people's brain development is not fully developed, right? But the adults are still not getting that, right? Despite the neuroscans evidence in front of you, your child just don't get it. Why can't you accept it? Because of this reason. But no, the adults will still persist to carry on doing the things that they repeatedly want to do, and after that they say, it's not working. Why? And you're still using the same strategy. Right? That's why I focus on talking about this morning. All right, and the heart of it all is relationship. It's not as simple to say that it's just relationship. Oh, Nick, is that only about relationship? But parents, listen. The relationship we're talking about here is this. We're talking about a relationship that has these two things. Number one, relational authority, and two, positional authority. What do I mean by that? Right, positional authority basically sounds something like this. I'm your father, whatever I say goes. I don't care how you feel. Right, in a school setting, I'm a discipline master, I'm a form teacher, do it. Right, and despite the fact that the child has no relationship with you, and I don't connect you as a father, I don't respect you, but I'm listening to you only because you are my father, or because you are the discipline master. That's positional authority. So any compliance on the child's part, it's only done so because of your position. That's not good enough. You want to have this thing called relational or emotional authority. Right? Why? Because at the end of the day, if there was something that you need to correct the child, you want the child to be able to respect you, to take heed onto your advice and value the advice and will even think twice about what you say. Right? And that is relational authority. Right? And you put that two together, relational authority and positional authority, then the child would be able to connect with you, even they don't like, even they're angry, there is a place in their heart, in their mind to consider what you have to say. That is the relationship I'm talking about. And if you know how to maneuver between the limbic strategy and the prefrontal strategy, then you are able to help them maintain this relationship with you in a logical and emotional way, because they are what? Primarily limbic, right? They're primarily limbic creatures. The adults, when we work with them, we are primarily logic or rational creatures. I need to clarify, I'm not saying, parents, I'm not saying that they cannot rationalize. I'm not saying that they cannot go to the prefrontal. They can. In fact, it's all there. But instinctually at the moment, when you're trying to get them to act on it, they will not automatically come from a prefrontal. They will come from the limbic first because it's fully developed. All the neural connections are fully formed, but not yet formed at the prefrontal, and still connecting between the limbic and the prefrontal. Therefore, it's a constant act of balancing for you as the adult, right, with our young child, every step of the way. You can tell them now something today, now at this very moment. 1 hour later, they'll totally not do it and not act on the agreement that they have with you. Why? Because of what we talked about this morning. Okay, we need to constantly strike a balance. And remember, you need to do this over a period of how long? Why? Because the connection is actually forming until the age of 25 because of the prefrontal neural connections. We're looking at a period of 10 years. That's why I'm calling a window of opportunity for them to learn. All right. So revisiting where we started off earlier, again, you have all these strategies. You are expert in this, and sometimes it can be so trying that you want to pull your hair out, right? And don't give up. Don't give up, because our child needs you. And there's no better place, no other better person to turn to but you. And the last thing you want for your kid to do is to turn to somebody else whom you do not know. And this somebody else, maybe teach them other strategies, right, that would not be helpful for your child, right? And they will take it on, and if they do it often enough, and that whole neural pathway, the connection is formed, right, it becomes a habit, right? Then they'll constantly go back to it, right? So how we really want to do this is to, use the limbic strategies, and these are the proposed ways in which I am offering to you, which I've already talked about this throughout the entire session in the morning, right? There are like 9 of them I'm proposing to you. I spoke to you about the reflection, the number 4 and number 5 already, right? In terms of we constantly do this because it's so easy for us to do it. To reward them with ice cream, you reward them with more money, more Wi-Fi time, that kind of thing, right? But the first one is about us having to use this strategy called the ask strategy. As opposed to us telling them, because we are very good at telling them at the prefrontal, we know a lot of information. We tell them the consequences. Hey, you don't study very much, you will not be able to go to the course that you want. These are all considerations of the part of the future. They are not there as much as they know what it is. But as opposed to using that strategy, we want to ask them, hey, what do you think of this? If you constantly do this, what are you doing? What do you think will happen? And so on and so forth, right? Don't expect them to immediately understand what you're saying and act on it as per we talk about it really, but therefore they should be able to act on it, right? Like I said, they will only know the information, but it's not natural for them to automatically act on it in the way in which they have spoken to you about, and even set an agreement or even sign a contract with you. They will not act on it. Why? Because of that whole period, the 10-year period for them to connect, right? And to make it automatic to react in a responsible manner, in a way that can be prioritizing for their own engagement, their commitments in life, and so on and so forth. The second one, right, is praise and encouragement. Very key, right? There's a difference between well done, son, you did a good job, versus having to say, well done, son, I really appreciate you having to take the effort of putting all the dishes from the dining table to the basin so that so that we can actually wash the dishes. And today is my turn, so I really appreciate it very much. Right? Why this is important is because, remember, at the end of the day, we're focusing on the neural connections between the limbic and the prefrontal. In having to be very concrete and explicit about what you are saying well done about, two things happen. Number one, they learn what you are affirming them about, and such that they can recognize what to repeatedly do. And if you add a reward to it, they will be incentivized to act again on it. And they know exactly what you are actually talking about. Right now, that's number one. Number two, it basically puts a responsibility back on them. That means they own their own action, right? Without realizing that they are actually acting on it. But because you say that, we want them to basically develop that self-understanding of their own actions and the consequence of that, in this case, desirable action. But similarly, if you want to reprimand, you want to take the same approach with them, right? Be very specific about what is undesirable, right? And make sure that you don't incentivize, because psychological term we talk about, we negatively reinforce, and that's the last thing we want to do. You want to constantly positively reinforce. Whatever I will desire the behavior, I reinforce the behavior, and that's positive reinforcement. And the more you reinforce that behavior, the better it is in terms of the neural pathways being formed in my brain, and becomes a habit for me. Okay? And usually, as far as gaming behavior is concerned, we constantly negatively reinforce as opposed to positively reinforce, because you don't have enough conversation with them to help them appreciate the details here, right? The praises versus encouragement, right? You don't have that conversation enough in a detailed manner to say what is desirable, what's undesirable. And therefore, we think that we are actually reinforcing, but we're actually negatively reinforcing the undesired behavior, which is actually constant gaming. And they will still continue to persist the gaming behavior, and thereby leading them into dependency and addiction without us realizing it, right? It's just psychology, right? Conditioning behavior. All right. Jumping to number 6, I talked about the 4 and 5 already extensively. 6 and 7, we're talking about catching them doing good, right? Because of our prefrontal development, it's very difficult for us to catch them doing good, because we are so hardwired in identifying, oh, you never tuck in your shirt, or you are actually not doing your homework, again, you sleep late, right? We always catch them doing all these negative things, but it's not natural almost for us to basically catch them doing good. I noticed that you actually, switch off your computer, half an hour before with the family, goes for dinner together. I noticed that you wake up on time early to actually get changed early before everybody else, because we are rushing for the toilet and to shower before we leave the house. Right? All these things are some things that are happening, but our focus is not on the good things, but we focus on the bad things. Why? We can unlearn and do something different. And this is a good strategy for working with our young people. Right? And setting boundaries. And this is something that Xing, Yong and Ruth was talking about as well. The boundaries are really important, because some of that boundaries, our kids don't know how to function. They don't know what is what, right? So therefore, like everything on your left, right, is all the boundaries that the strategies that you use to set the boundaries. But instead of being so specific and so narrow in setting the boundaries, you want to make it broad enough such that they have enough space, right, for them to actually make mistakes. And in making their mistakes, they learn, and then they self-select. Remember the third column of the black lines, everything in terms of the behavior development, right? They learn how to adopt and use the correct behavior, right? That will work for them, right? And they work for you as well. And as much alignment, there's a lot of alignment, and that's good lah. Right? Then there's no alignment. Then in terms of the behavior that we're expecting from our child, then we have a conversation and then we manage together. Okay. Yeah. And then we have empowerment and chunking. So empowerment is simply about having to trust them to be able to execute what was talked about and what was agreed as far as behaviors are concerned. Trust them to empower them to basically be the one having to call time out. Despite, and at the back of your head, you must expect that they will make a mistake or they won't follow through. But we want to help them account for that kind of behavior. How do we account for them? It's the how again, right? Making sure you engage with them at the limit. And finally, the chunking is basically to help them, manage themselves by saying, okay, during this time, this is what we're having family time. Or every once a week, you must have family time together. Or this time is only study time or self-reading time, and this is gaming time, right? So that we can help them appreciate, right, what is to come, and then they self-manage. And if you do everything on the above, like for example, giving the opportunity to own their own actions and own their consequences, right? All these things comes into play, they learn effectively. And you do it often enough, it becomes a new pathway is being formed, they develop, it becomes a habit. Okay, so with all that, it looks something like this now. All right, with all that, we'll be helping them thrive in the world, be it in their academic pursuits, helping them go to university, helping them in their young professional careers, all right, good or bad. In doing all this, we help them build their neural pathways in the brain. Deep, strong neural pathways between their limbic and their prefrontal. Right, as much as possible, we help them develop that by asking all the strategies. And some of those strategies in which I have been doing is basically something, I'm now sharing with you some of the strategies in which you're asking the tools that we're talking about. This particular strategy that I'm using is non-medicinal based, right? And we're using this for anyone who has attention issues, right? And in extreme cases, ADHD, right? And we use a neurofeedback strategy using the devices to help them rewire the brain in such a way that we put away all the undesirable behaviors in terms of neural behaviors are concerned, the neural pathways are concerned, and develop, right, more desirable behaviors, neurologically speaking. Okay, these are some of the resources in which you can reach out to, all right, as far as seeking out for help in terms of helping them manage gaming behavior, social media behavior, and so on and so forth, both government, public organizations, and non-profit organizations. Obviously also us, right? Now, let's take a while for you to screenshot this if you need to. And next one is, this just came in like last week. I'm very excited to share you this. I mean, this is like, simply put, right? It's like, you can't beat them in the game, join them in the game kind of situation, right? And I thought I better do something very innovative and creatively. I went to find this thing called the blue glass, and they're constantly in front of the screen, right? Right. I mean, research has shown, right? I mean, the blue light glasses, right, doesn't stop them. I mean, it's not so effective in terms of the blue light coming into our eyes. But this basically talks about the cutting out the blue light, activating the neurons in our brains, right? Such that in extreme cases, right, prevent headaches or even migraines for some, right? To just stop the activation of the brain. And we want to effectively, after this morning session, right, to basically activate the brain in such a way to help them develop healthy behavior instead, as opposed to letting them continuously do the behavior, right? Yeah, so anyway, this just came in, I just knew, I'm excited to share with you all. So I will just give this away for free, all right? You just pay the delivery, just type in the code SMILE5 and you will just get it for free. I just wanted to share this with you, all right? I'm very excited about it. And then, yes, I'm glad it's done. There's a lot to cover. I hope you all get it and we talk about this in our Q&A, okay?
Thanks so much, Nicholas. That is indeed a lot that you have covered together with Ruth and Xing as well. Okay, maybe this is the part now that everybody is waiting for, Q&A. So I guess I want to take in what Ruth and Xing previously mentioned. There are certain skill sets, very useful skill sets in gaming that a child can glean from gaming, right? Like what Ruth mentioned about, strategic thinking, planning, and all that. And then, of course, there are some good traits that Xing brought up in personality types. I would love to be a guru, mastery of something, great, fantastic. But it doesn't really take away the top concern that parents have about, how they can understand their kid who games, how they can limit or cut down on the gaming time. So, Nicholas, first of all, how, after this session, immediately after this session, let's say our participants log off, they do their thing for the rest of the day, and then they see their kid gaming on the computer, on the console, wherever. And instead of reacting to like how they would normally react, whether it's frustration or anxiety or anything, what should their first steps be? And I'm asking I'm asking for like some practical advice, because we have covered a lot of theoretical things. So what would your practical advice be for them? Should they observe, or should they take some actionable moves?
First and foremost, if they are already gaming, and once you switch off with us and you turn around and you see them playing the game, you don't want to engage them. You don't want to even teach them, tell them anything at that point in time. That's almost impossible. Not encouraged. You just want to make a comment. Okay, we're having lunch later on at 12 o'clock. We're really past 12. We're having lunch at 1 o'clock, whatever it is. Right? I would like to talk to you all. Right? I'd like to talk to you. Right? Or anything that you feel that you can call time for them to be able to have a conversation with you, if you would like to have a conversation with them. Right? And that's generally how you want to actually approach them on anything similar to the scenario that you have just painted for us, Olivia. If they actually are already playing, you really there's no need for you to engage them, reprimand them. It's very difficult. Why? Because they are fully limbic in the flow, like what Ruth would say, right? And if they are in it, it's very difficult to get them out of it. And then you only breed resentment, breed frustration, dislike, and so on and so forth. Oh wow, right? So why go into that kind of situation? Instead, I would rather recommend and encourage you all to be in a space with them whereby they are totally with you on what you want to say, what kind of conversation that you want to have with them, right? And call for that time. Hey guys, later on, we're going out for dinner, or later on, hey, I want to speak to you all. Be explicit as possible about what you want to do with them, right? And arrange a time that this is one you have. But bear in mind, because they're limbic responders, you don't want to prepare like 1 hour session with them. All right. You see Ruth laughing at it. At the end of the day, right, it's very difficult to sustain them for that whole entire hour. What you want to do is that I need to speak to you. In your mind, it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Be prepared with your questions, what you want to ask, right? Hopefully you can engage them using the ask approach as opposed to tell approach. I don't know a lot about games. Will you be able to explain to me what is it about? How come it's so long? Go in with that approach, and that's very limbic in nature. So you can do that. So set time aside.
Ruth and Xing, I mean, you mentioned that you guys were really enthusiastic. I would hesitate to use the word addicts, right? Because those criteria and all that, don't want to label or theorize anything, but you guys were active gamers in your youth, still young, but when you were younger. So how did your parents approach you on this? How did they voice their concerns? And was it something you were receptive to, or did you because it just wasn't the right window for you guys when they broached it? So how did that all play out?
Ruth, do you want to answer first?
Oh,
Okay. I'll answer first.
All right.
I think something I alluded to in very early on is that my parents basically saw me as addicted, right, when I was very enthusiastic. So to them, they saw that the games as a problem, right? So that I was basically like hooked on like a drug, right? I know for a fact that I myself, I didn't want to be in this state, right? It wasn't nice to basically know that I have a problem, even though I did. But I guess is that kind of response that I got. And for me, right, why I played, right, I mean, I wanted to be the best, right? But I alluded in my story earlier, I was struggling with a lot of frustration, right? In school, I wasn't doing well, right? I was being bullied, right? There was so much pent up frustration that I really wanted to turn to games to basically cope with it, right? It didn't help for me when I go home and I already have this problem, right? I in school I was being bullied. Maybe because I was antisocial, maybe because I wasn't a good friend to them, right? I already struggling with all these inadequacies, right? And then I come home and I realize, oh, there's something else I'm inadequate in as well, right? I'm an addict, right? I'm unable to be a good son to them, right? So these were things that basically piled on, and it all the more made the gaming world so much better, because here was a world where I could feel that at least I was something, right? And I want to say this, that at the end of the day, I say all this, right? Yes, I had a part to play as well. And I know that my parents, at the end of the day, they did everything out of love. Whatever that they said, it was out of concern, right? And it's only at this point right now that I look back and I realize that a lot of things that they were worried for me. But it was just that at that point of time, when I was receiving it in my limbic self, there was so many things that was going on and I couldn't process. And I wish that I could have, but I was processing the bullying, I was processing the frustration, the addiction problem, and it all just all came crashing in. So that was how I felt. That was how my parents responded, and that was how I felt.
I think for myself, I didn't share much of how I got into it. So actually I'm the youngest in my family, I have two older brothers. So my parents thought it was a good idea to buy console. At that time, about 20 years ago, everyone plays on console, not on mobile phones. So everyone was sharing. And then to me, it was companionship. The idea of playing together felt like family, it was family time. So that was actually when I started to get so-called addicted, right, to games, playing a lot more. And I think it was very hard in that sense that because as a girl, like sometimes people ask, is it more common for guys to be in games as compared to girls? And with your peers, you don't really have any girlfriends to talk about games. Like at our time, or rather when we were younger, games are for geeks and nerds. So I didn't have anybody to share. But I think my parents knew about it, but they didn't. When they were approaching the topic of gaming, they didn't say it's like, oh, see, you gaming again now, your problem. But it's more towards that you are not taking responsibility of your time. They didn't target the games, but they always targeted at what they believe that I could do better in that sense. But of course, this method sounds very good, but it didn't help at one point that there was really a time where I was really, really very hooked onto a game and school was going to start. So I think at that point of time, my dad was quite frustrated. Then he took away my PlayStation Portable at that time. And at that time, I didn't know what to do. So I was actually quite emotionally oh no, where's my game? What's now? And to admit in a very, like, thinking back, it's like, oh, very silly, but I actually didn't know what to do so much that I started hitting my head on the wall because it's like, I just really don't know what to do. And I think that was the first time my parents panicked. It was like, oh, like, usually I'm quite normal, right? Like, normal kid, but well, that's the first time they actually put back the PlayStation and they didn't say anything. But I realized that they were very, very cautious as well. But they started asking me, like, what do you like about the game? Like, they started talking to me, but very, very cautiously, making sure that it's not yanking it out like what Nick was sharing in his story. So as I grew older, I realized that my parents were actually, I would say this to all parents, we can share, seeing that I share here, right? Like, oh wow, we sound like the expert, but our parents also went through all the struggles of 20 years waiting. Wow, the waiting game is very painful. Even until today, after work, sometimes you're playing games like, hey, how come you're playing? That kind of thing. You still have that, you see. So, but I think they really tried connecting with me. And actually, I'm very thankful to my parents, even for this opportunity now to share, because at this point, I was struggling, like, whether should I go and find a so-called normal job or do I do gaming? And there was like throughout the years of actually like observing and say, hey, actually you like gaming, right? Why not you try explore these areas, so on and so forth. So instead of like, it's not just about encouraging me to game, but they took the time to really talk to me. And of course, when we are at that moment, of course you would say, wow, Ruth, were you still angry with your parents for yanking out that? Of course I do remember it. It's still, I still remember that feeling, but at the same time is looking back, I remember all the times where they knock on my door or talk to me and I ignore them. I know that they're always there, but it's just that, of course, now flashback, then of course, yeah, but at that point of time, I'm definitely angry. I was definitely frustrated, definitely like thinking, wow, I don't want to see my parents ever again kind of attitude. But I think that was at that time emotionally. But of course, once get through that phase with that building of that relationship, then I realized, wow, my parents, thankfully for my parents, and of course, even my teachers and friends who were there for me, I think that was how we cope with it. So long story cut short is that there's really no perfect solution, or like, can I say this method that my parents did for me, would it be the same for every kid? Not really. Like, I believe parents know their kids best. Like they know how to talk, what will connect. And I just wanted to share as well that because I'm a bit more talkative, so this kind of works. But there'll be some kids who maybe guru, they just talk for the sake of talk. Like if you ask them, they'll just give you one word reply because that's really what you're asking. But don't need to force it out. I think you just really know that the kids will know when you care. It's like you're in the room quietly, you know your parents are knocking the door, they might not reply, but they know that you're there spending time. They know that you love. Yeah, I think the key thing is like sometimes that distance is also good to actually the kids actually real know that the parents really love them, and it's just that sometimes we are not responding. Yeah, so sharing from maybe from the youth perspective. Yeah, so hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Right. So
Can I just jump in quickly, Rach? Just quickly, just jump in on that point there, right? For what Ruth was actually talking about. That's why I like to highlight this point to parents, right? That actually there is no right strategy. You have got it all there. You remember on my right column, right? All the what you are doing at this point in time. Go with it. Trust yourself that these are all effective because either you have learned it, you have actually experienced it yourself, you know your work, right? Trust a good judgment. But the question here, as far as his kids are concerned, is there because they're growing. Therefore, it's how you execute them, right? And each child is different. So even if you have 3 kids in your household, at the end of the day, each child will require a different strategy about pushing them, right? In executing the same strategy, but in a very different way, right? That's all. Thank you.
well said to all 3 of you. So guys, we have hit 12:30, but we will answer your question. So hang in there. Next question is, of course, addressing another concern that parents have when they know that their child is gaming is not just about, you know, violence or the content of the game, but who they're gaming with, the people that they meet. So we have a few questions asking about Discord chatting. So I had to Google this because, you know, gaming is not my area of expertise at all. A Discord chat, for those who, like me, may not be specifically knowledgeable about that, is a chat service, right? It's specifically designed for gamers to talk to each other, connect with each other, either via text or voice or I guess video chat. So anyway, so the questions are, you know, the concerns that I guess the repercussions that this sort of Discord chatting has, especially when it comes to, you know, their kids chatting with strangers, essentially. So what do you guys say to that?
I think I can take the question. So just to frame, yes, so Discord, right, is case imagine it as a bit of Skype, like Skype for older, maybe for the parents, like you can send media, so on and so forth. So what happens in Discord, there'll be a room where, okay, so I know there's always a lot of security features that parents will want to implement. Can they don't talk to strangers, blah, blah, blah. But I'll just be honest, a lot of the gamers come onto these platforms because they want to meet like-minded gamers. So they are actually coming in to actually talk to strangers in that sense, right? But of course, I know there's such thing as catfishing, like pretending to be someone else, so on and so forth. So I think the key thing here is that really having that connection with your child to make sure that who are they talking to and what are they going to do. For example, are they going to send I won't say secrets, like maybe like even password information, for example, information about the household, photos, or even meeting up face to face with someone they haven't met. I think that's very key thing that is like what we were saying, accountability of the child to the parent, but to also understand that in this space, right, they might come into contact with so-called strangers. It could be strangers, not just totally strangers, could be mutual friends. For example, let's say I'll just give an example like Nicholas and Xing. If let's say I know Xing as a friend, but I don't know Nicholas. Let's say if Xing invites Nicholas to the chat or to the room, I become a mutual friend to Nicholas, and I might actually start talking to Nicholas altogether as well. But it does not mean that it's safe for me to meet Nicholas privately. I still need to, of course, one thing is, of course, maybe I might actually go out with Xing with 3 of us together, or I actually have to also, like we said, tell our parents, hey, this is what's happening, is it advisable or not? And then of course for the child to respect a parent's decision, or even sometimes the parents to go with the child, or even asking the older siblings. I think the key thing is also to just make everyone accountable for each other, especially when dealing with strangers online. But also say like every time when we talk about making sure the kids don't talk to strangers, that's a very hard thing to do because they're actually looking for companionship, they're looking for topics to talk about, because there's a lot of rooms there that, like, for example, if I love to play Genshin Impact, there's actually a server out there, a room out there for like-minded Genshin lovers to actually communicate, so on and so forth. But that being said, also take note that although there are a lot of moderators in these servers to make sure there's like safe content, that make sure that no one's doing funky business, but of course we still need to take our own precautions as parents or even as the young ones. Yeah.
Anything else to add, Xing Yong? You were nodding. Okay, no.
Conquer.
So, we, out of the 4 personality types, and no matter which one your child falls into, right, there are good points, there are good skills and there are good traits. And so, like, one of our questions that we've gotten is, the child, has good planning skills, finding info on strategy, organizing, but only when it comes to gaming. So what is anybody's advice on how to, of course, apply these fantastic skills in gaming to, in other aspects?
I mean, if the child is really demonstrating all these skills, how I normally engage the child then is observing all this, having observed, like in the communication, having observed all these skills. Hey, you could demonstrate all this. Why is it that having the conversation and asking, why is it that it's not appearing in other areas of your life? And normally, I think the common response you always, I think the answer to that is usually that they are not. It's not so much of they don't have the skill, but whether they are interested enough to apply.
In your case, Xing Yong, so sorry to interrupt, but I know you because in telling of your own personal story, you talked about your love for English and writing essays, but it was something that you found within yourself, or was it spurred on by a conversation with your teacher or your family?
I know. Okay. I try to recall, but I think that it was also very largely spurred on by how I realized that it's one of my strengths when growing up, right? Maybe along the way, I had people telling me that I could write well, right? And that was something that stuck onto me, right? And it wasn't so much of the writing well, it's more of the fact that I could do well, right? And that composition was that one little thing out of don't know how many things that I could actually do well. I mean, that's why I stuck on to the composition part. And it's just very naturally, I had the drive to wanted to do well. But it's just that it was only at that particular area, and the other areas, I was basically labeled a failure, or whatnot. So I guess it really helped that my teacher helped me to expand on that and to help me see that, I had these other strengths as well, right? And to encourage me along the way. So I know that my story is very shortened, right? It just seemed like, my teacher just did one magic wand and boom, and suddenly I just sprouted, right? But along the way, there was a lot of encouragement. My teachers, they were really my saviors in that sense, right? They will constantly encourage me and spend time after school and instead of basically accusing, like, you're not handing out your homework, you're lazy. I remember my teacher actually went to talk to me and ask me, what's going on, Xing Yong? Right? How come, you could do this, but why didn't you do that? What's going on? And they really had that conversations and just encouraging me along the way and helped me to see that, hey, it wasn't that I wasn't interested. I also want to do well. Trust me, I think all kids, if they could, right, they could wave their magic wand and say, I wanted to do well. All kids want to do well, but it's just that I didn't know how at that point of time. Yeah.
And to add to that as well, and the experience of success is taken for granted. Now we assume that actually this is something that a child would have experienced and they know what it tastes like and what it looks like and how to get it. It's an assumption, and a lot of them don't, and they don't know how to reach there and get it, right? And bearing in mind also, this is in the context of a period of like 3 years for Xing Yong's case, right? There's constant encouragement from his teacher, right? So if we want to prep ourselves as parents, as the adults working with the young people, that it doesn't cut it if you just do it once or twice, right? It has to be constantly encouraging, affirming, catching them doing good, right? And acknowledging and pinpointing the fact that, hey, you did this and this led to this, you succeed. How does it feel like? And then you want to help them recognize that feeling right? And that's what I mean by you need to get in with the limbic approach, the limbic connection, right? As opposed to the prefrontal connection. And the more they feel it, the more we'll be helping them develop their internal drive to help them want to succeed on their own outside of the gaming space. And we want to encourage that more and more by pinpointing to it, pinpointing the behavior that could transfer to the real world. And in the real world, keep affirming it, keep getting them doing good, right? Over a period of time. And it's easy to say this, but adults give up very fast. They give up very fast in the sense that I've been saying this like 1,001 times already, but they're still doing it. I'll be very frustrated. In that sense, giving up, right? But after this morning session with me, you'll be able to appreciate the fact that that's not how it works, right? They need the time with us. They are learning, and they will need people to guide them, and they want to learn from you, right? Don't misunderstand that part. And they also really want to succeed. They also love you a lot, right? And sometimes when they say bad things to you that can be very hurtful, it's not meant to purposely attack you. There's no malice intent. They're not malicious. They're just reacting. So we need to catch that, convert them into a positive, right? Reframe it and carry on the journey with them for the next how many years? Until every child is different in terms of their readiness, right? So go with them and pace them.
I think I want to add that a lot of times, I think Ruth, you have the experience that when we were younger, we say things and we do things that we don't mean at all. When we say that, sometimes you ask the kids, hey, you don't care about your studies at all. I don't care, or I don't care about my parents. They are so irritating to me. We always say that, but we don't mean it, right? And more often than not, right, whenever we have the arguments and the conversation with the parents, it may seem like we don't care. I tell you, it hurts as much as it hurts the parents, it hurts us as well. But it's just that at the point of time, you are in the limbic. We don't know what's going on. There's so many feelings that's going on. It's overwhelming. And it's just painful, and we do things that we it ends up hurting us, but that's just us in the teenage years. So I guess it's when you really dive deeper and you realize, is it really you don't care? No, actually I want my parents to look at me and to have that conversation with me, but it's not happening. That's why it's painful, and that's why it seems like I don't care, but actually deep down I do, right? And I can speak from my experience, even if I can't speak for your children, parents, but I know that that's how I feel, and I know that that's how Ruth, we do feel, right?
Yeah, and to the point about a comment that talks about, I need to clarify this point. It's not about giving up. I agree with you, but that's what the child reads it to be, right? Because we're coming from a good place, and we are there to protect them from getting hurt. Granted, and that is always the place that we all come from. All parents do that, right? And how we execute that often gets how we do that often gets misinterpreted by our kids, right? And in this case, in along the lines of like having to want to protect them, and sometimes we are seen as like, okay, I mean, I do it once so many times already, and it's not going to work because mom's not going to be happy about it. Dad's still going to punish me. My allowance is going to get cut, for example. So this comes to the learned helplessness. Then what's the point? They really give up already, and we are still thinking it's our protection, but that's not what they do. So sometimes because of that, they start to develop lying behavior. What's the point, right? Of having to say this or do this, that kind of thing, and yes, mom is actually, or dad is actually protecting me, but it comes across as that you're not patient with me. You say it one too many times today. I'm still going to fail, and I have failed. I've disappointed you somewhat, not only just once, but time and time again. I give up already lah. Not only I give up, I know that you're not already, right? And it comes out in frustration. It comes out in your language. It comes out in your non-verbals and everything else. And I start to because I love you, I don't want you to feel that way. I don't want it to affect you. Therefore, I do things like lie. I do things behind your back and things like that, right? So the giving up it's not you giving up, but recognizing that the child sees it very differently. Number one. Number two is the giving up also seen is from this point of view that because we do have not appreciated where they are at developmentally, and we constantly come to them at the prefrontal, and it's almost like, wow, so distasteful, this very frustrating, almost resentful sometimes, and very hurtful also because of what they say to us. And it's like, okay, I don't know what to do. I don't want to go limbic way. I don't take a different approach, but I keep coming back at the prefrontal approach, right? So that's seen as the giving up. Just to clarify it. Yeah, thank you.
No, thanks for that, Nick. Okay, so guys, we are really, going quite beyond our stipulated time, but that it's just such a dense topic. So, for the three of you, if there are three takeaways that you want our participants to remember after this session, what would that be? So three takeaways, one for each. Ruth, you can go first.
Oh, okay. Trying to figure out. Okay, ladies first then.
Yeah.
I think whatever that, especially I think just for my session as well, like I think a lot of parents maybe have definitely thousands and one questions about games, and maybe even going through and say, oh no, like there'll be new games coming up, I can't keep up, give it up lah. No need to connect with my kids anymore. But I think the key thing why we went through about the game design and stuff is not really to share like for you to be experts. I think none of us, I speak for the youth, expect any adults to understand even 1% of what the game is going on. But I think the key thing is about the interest. So I think as we were talking, if you realize that we went from technical of the games all the way to the relationship with the children, is that they actually, as gamers, we just want the parents to know that they care. We want to know that they are interested in what we're doing, even though it's games, even and hope that they don't see it as a time wasting thing. I think a lot of times is, can't you do something better? I think that's the mindset that will actually say like, hey, since you think whatever I'm doing is useless, then forget it. I think that's the thing that we really just want to share, that it's really not about the game, but the gamers. So I hope that even as we share the stories and share strategies, just remember that they're still your children. Like they're still human. You can talk to them. If you really don't know anything, you can really ask. And even who knows, can explore together. I think you just find, you instead of seeing games as the devil, use it to your benefit. How do you connect with your child, or how do you even start conversations that later steer to other conversations? Yeah, use it to your benefit. And yeah, definitely hope that this session is beneficial to everybody. Yeah.
I guess I can go next. I mean, there's a lot of takeaways, but what I really want to share is not so much of a takeaway, but encouragement. I mean, I shared my story, right? I shared how I make that turnaround. It's amazing what I did well and everything. The truth is that beyond the O-levels period, right? That was just a start, right? Beyond the O-levels period, my relationship with my parents was not well, right? I mean, in my polytechnic years, I, even though I did well, in my studies and all, but my relationship was still very strained, right? To the point where basically in poly years, right, all my everyday life is I wake up, I go to school, I come home, I shut myself into my room. When they come in and talk to me, I give one word answer, right? And basically it's so cold and so detached, right? And that's how the relationship really manifested all the way lah. So the thing is that I mean, at any point of time, it continued on for quite some time, and I feel like at any point of time, a lot of parents would have just saying, this kid is gone case, he's hopeless already, right? So late already, still haven't woken up yet, right? Don't want to talk to the parents, right? Don't appreciate anything that you do for me, right? But I'm just very thankful that my parents all the way, I know that a lot of things that they did really irked me, but I know one thing that they did well was that they did things with love, and they continued to believe in me, because I could tell that, even when I was cold to them, they would still try to ask me out for dinner. I remember each time when, I would act very cold and detached, and it's painful for me. But I remember each time when I said yes, let's go have dinner together, I can remember their eyes just light up, and it makes them so happy. And that to me suggests that they still love me. At the end of the day, a lot of things that they did may have irritated me, but they still love me. And now here I stand, right, in my adult years, when I'm able to think and I'm able to look back, right, even though there's so many years that I wasted where I could have built a relationship, but when I look back and I know that they loved me, and this is the point where I'm really starting to make that U-turn, and I'm starting to take that step forward as well, right? Starting to be a bit more brave and, initiate conversations, have some laugh with them, and things like that, right? It may seem late for a lot of people, but for me, I never saw it as late, and I'm glad that my parents never did, right? So to a lot of parents out there, I don't know, I just want to encourage you that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe some tunnels are a bit longer than others, but there will always be a U-turn, and I just want to encourage you that your child, no matter what they show, they still love you. I speak from my experience, I speak for Ruth. We always love you, and no matter what hurtful things they say, right, a lot of times we don't mean it. And it's just said out of hurt, but deep down, we still want that relationship. So push on. Yeah, I know it's hard. I know I was hard to my parents, right? They can tell you that for sure, but push on, right? There will be a U-turn. Yeah.
Okay, and it's never too late. And I echo everything Ruth and Xing said. And to also at this point that they don't know any better and they don't know where else to get the information, really. Right? And you want to be the person to be able to provide that guidance, that direction moving forward. Right? And after today, it's not so simple to be able to appreciate all this and then after that execute it. Right? I spend a lot of time in my one-to-one consults with families, right? More time with the parents, the adults compared to the child. Right? Simply because as adults, a lot of things, by which time we are as parents already, a lot of things have been set in place for us in terms of our thinking, our attitudes, and even our behaviors, right? If our kids especially, right? And it doesn't help when we have 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, and every kid it will be a different strategy, right? And they're all very different, obviously, right? So my parting words to everybody is do not give up, right? Understood in the context I shared with you earlier, they need us, right? And if you need to find time for each other in terms of mom and dad, right? Or in terms of like if you're a single parent family, find ways in which you can actually recharge, right? Because it is very trying, it's very challenging. Totally agree with you, you know, and it sucks a lot out of you on top of having to manage your work, your personal commitment, and so on and so forth, right? There are resources available to support you, us included, including the FES team, right? Reach out to them, right? And I wish you all the best. And if you need more information, they are on our website, my website, right? To talk about or to dissect, especially my part is quite technical and it's quite heavy. And that's the reason why there's the ebook for you to spend some time going through it again. It should be a lot easier after this. And other information that is complementing the content I've talked about this morning, right? So I wish you well. Thank you for this opportunity.
And thank you so much to Nicholas, Ruth, Xing, Yong. I speak on behalf of everybody here that we have appreciated your time. Fantastic insights on a very fascinating topic indeed. So I think, long process, right? Parenting is a waiting game, it's a long process. Don't give up, stay the course. And, like Xing Yong's parents and probably Ruth's parents, wait for that U-turn, wait for that turnaround. Guys, there are so many lovely messages in our chat group. So, just have a read through. Thank you very much for our participants who left these notes. They're very encouraging. There were so many links that were mentioned today by all 3 of our speakers. So we have attached a PDF document in the chat that you can always download and, access those links in your free time. And if you found this session useful, you may want to donate to the Family Enrichment Society because, FES depends on your donations to put up these informative sort of webinars or sessions to tackle all these topics that are of grave concern to some parents. So if you'd like to contribute, we have the QR code right there for you. Very simple. Open your banking app, select the scan and pay option, scan the QR code and make your donation. Once again, thank you very much for joining us today. On behalf of the Family Enrichment Society, we appreciate you taking time off from your Saturday. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day and I'll see you soon. And for now, I'll hand you back over to Nicholas Lee.
Thank you, Olivia. And thank you to Ruth, Potato Fluff Lim, and Xing Yong, Ape Shit Po, and Nicholas. Well, Nicholas, yours is the most normal center name, Gabriel Lim. So, but if you can see and again, thank you so much for all the messages in the chat. I mean, they're so affirming, especially for the speakers. If you have not left one, please do. We will go through the chat after this as well to see the questions, and it'll help us also to understand better what we may need to address moving forward. This will be the last session for the year. But again, as Olivia says, we do run programs. I think next year there's a heart program coming up. This is a character formation program for pre-teens and teens. So look out for that. You can find more information on the FES website. And as Olivia said, any donations you make, and again, we're not asking for huge amounts, even if it's just $10, $15, it's totally, we'll be more than grateful, right? Because anyway, it's just about numbers, and again, us being able to put up these programs, because all these things obviously need money. So your donation will help a lot go towards these programs that we put on. So there will be more webinars coming up, and based on your feedback, it'll also help us to understand what kind of topics would be relevant for you at this point in time. If I can just invite you also to just, I think the poll is up. If you could help us go through this very simple few questions and just give us some feedback. I think there was another poll as well, directly for, how do you pronounce this?
Susus.
Susus. Totally confused with the spelling, but anyway, yeah. If there was another poll in the chat, if you can give Susus some feedback about the particular topics that each of the speakers touched on, that would also be really useful. So with that, it brings us to the end of this session. We really thank you for spending the last almost 3.5 hours with us. We hope this was informative. And again, if you have any feedback that you want to send to us directly, you can also reach us via our Facebook page, FES Facebook page, or FES website, and in the contact us. Yeah, and with that, I thank you once again on behalf of FES and all the speakers, and Olivia, our moderator.
Try to smile my tears away. I try to keep my cool. Oh, but one more door gets in my way. I feel like such a fool. Trembled and bitter, my heart just wants to bleed and stop believing in me. It feels like nothing is for certain, and that nothing comes for free. When they're lowering the curtain to the theater of my dreams, I stumble